Chapter 585. Black Lotus seemed to really understand Murong-Yu's words. The 3 leaves and the lotus pod actually nodded a few times. Seeing this scene, Murong-Yu was suddenly shocked. Black Lotus, you can understand me? Murong-Yu was a little surprised. He looked at Black Lotus and asked again. This time, Black Lotus's leaves and lotus pod nodded again. Finally, Murong-Yu was sure that Black Lotus could understand him. Black Lotus could understand what he was saying, but Murong-Yu was worried. Black Lotus no longer imprisoned him and allowed him to leave here. This was a good thing. It meant that he could finally leave here. However, there were so many people outside who were eyeing him covetously. Murong-Yu had no doubt that as long as he left Black Lotus's side, the power of those powerhouses outside would tear him to pieces. Should I teleport away directly? Murong-Yu tried to contact Hichu, and found that there was no problem entering Hichu Luoshu. Hichu Luoshu could also teleport away directly. However, Murong-Yu glanced at Black Lotus and Xieze and the others outside. Murong-Yu didn't know if Black Lotus had the kind of Black Lotus seed that could bring the dead back to life. Although Black Lotus had a lotus pod and there might be lotus seeds in it, Murong-Yu didn't know if those lotus seeds were so magical. However, Murong-Yu would be lying if he said that he didn't have any thoughts about the legendary Black Lotus seed. Moreover, he believed that if Black Lotus couldn't move, no matter how powerful he was, his ending would be very tragic in the end. Because he had been discovered, the people outside would not let him go. Even if he was powerful, he couldn't move. Being unable to move was the biggest limitation of Black Lotus. Moreover, the immortals outside knew too much. If Murong-Yu left now, he wouldn't doubt that the people outside would suspect that he had gained some benefits from Black Lotus. After all, his strength had improved so much in a short time. These people would definitely find trouble with him in the future. They just wanted to get some benefits from him to increase their strength. Regardless of this, Black Lotus had helped Murong-Yu break through his realm. Just this point alone was enough to show that Black Lotus had helped Murong-Yu. Even if Murong-Yu was not tempted by the Black Lotus seed, he would not watch the Black Lotus be destroyed. Black Lotus, can you move by yourself? Murong-Yu asked. Black Lotus did not respond. Murong-Yu continued to ask in another way. You can't leave here by yourself? At this moment, the swaying leaves of the Black Lotus finally responded. Black Lotus, you helped me, and I don't want you to be destroyed. And if you can't move, do you see those people outside? Not only were they powerful, but they also had many forces behind them. Even if your space laws are powerful, it's a fact that you can't move. As long as there are enough of them, you can be killed. I'm not trying to scare you. So, if it's possible, you can leave with me. Of course, if you don't trust me, just pretend I didn't say anything, Murong-Yu said in a deep voice. Whoosh! At this moment, Black Lotus disappeared in an instant. It turned into a black light and rushed directly into Murong-Yu's body. It was so fast that Murong-Yu could not react in time. This was because he really did not expect Black Lotus to be willing to leave and enter his body directly. Black Lotus disappeared. He took it away. Pan Lin and the others outside the lake wanted to send experts over, so they kept an eye on Black Lotus. Therefore, when they saw Black Lotus turn into a black light and rush into Murong-Yu's body, they immediately reacted. Rumble! In an instant, terrifying waves of energy annihilated the void and crazily shot towards Murong-Yu. Murong-Yu's face changed abruptly. Then his figure swayed and disappeared on the spot. He had already entered the He-Tu and the Luo-Shu. Then, he teleported away. Rumble, without the obstruction of Black Lotus's space law, the power of Xieze and the others directly tore apart the void where Black Lotus was originally located and even the entire lake. However, what infuriated Pan Lin and the others was the fact that Murong-Yu had already disappeared. That brat definitely didn't get far. Shatter this space and blast him out of the spatial treasure. Kong Pei roared angrily and began to release power to cover the area. He wanted to force Murong-Yu out of the space treasure. At the same time, the others began to attack madly within a radius of tens of thousands of miles around where Black Lotus was originally located. If it was an ordinary space treasure, Even if one escaped into it, he would not be able to leave the place. However, there was a limit to the amount of energy a spatial treasure could withstand. Once this limit was exceeded, the spatial treasure would be shattered. Therefore, Pan Lin and the others began to bombard the area, trying to force Murong Yu out. However, what they did not know was that Murong Yu's space explosion was not an ordinary space treasure. While they were bombarding the area, Murong Yu had long since left the area. After Murong Yu left, everyone was furious and began to bombard the area. However, none of them noticed that a pink gas had suddenly appeared beside them. Pan Lin and the others did not notice the pink gas. This was because the pink gas did not have any effect other than being pink. As a result, the pink gas increased and directly drowned them. While they were not paying attention, the pink gas had already invaded their bodies and attacked their souls. That's not right. Why is there only pink gas around us? Finally, when the pink gas became denser, an immortal duke finally reacted. This was because he saw that other than the area where they were, there was no pink gas at all. It was really strange. After this immortal duke's reminder, everyone else reacted. However, the pink death directly affected the soul. It was very terrifying. When they realized that something was wrong, it was already too late. A weaker, Nine Heavens Xian immortal suddenly roared and slapped a male Nine Heavens Xian immortal next to him to the ground. Then he tore his clothes and that of the male Nine Heavens Xian immortal on the ground and was about to push the Nine Heavens Xian immortal down. What are you doing? Seeing this Nine Heavens Xian immortal's actions, the other Nine Heavens Xian immortals around him were enraged and sent him flying with a punch. This was because they were not from the same sect, and the Nine Heavens Xian immortal was a member of their sect. Naturally, they would not watch someone from their sect being pushed down by someone else. Roar! The Nine Heavens Xian immortal who was sent flying roared and pounced on another Nine Heavens Xian immortal next to him. Under everyone's shocked gazes, a second person did the same. Then a third, a fourth. More and more people did the same. They seemed to have been hit by an aphrodisiac. Pan Lin's expression changed drastically. He immediately reacted and shouted, "Everyone, get away from the pink gas." However, Pan Lin's reaction was still a little too slow. At the same time, all the Nine Heavens Xian immortals present, including some immortal kings, had been hit by the pink death. After Murong Yu's strength had increased, the pink death's power had become even more terrifying. Moreover, with his current strength, if he used the pink death, he could easily infect the souls of immortal kings. Moreover, these people did not even realize that they had been poisoned before the pink death acted up. By the time they realized it, the souls of the Nine Heavens Xian immortals, immortal kings, and immortal dukes had already been infected. Of course, only some of the more powerful people were affected. Even though their souls had been infected by the pink death, they did not act up for a while. In the Hichu Luo Shu, Murong Yu looked indifferently at Pan Lin and the other immortal dukes. As for the experts below the immortal king realm, Murong Yu was sure that their souls had all been infected by the pink death. They would definitely not be able to leave the immortal land. However, what made Murong Yu frown was these immortal dukes. When he had first killed Gong Xiang, he had joined forces with Gong Hong, who was an immortal duke, but they had almost been killed by Gong Xiang. After going through so much danger, Gong Xiang had finally been killed. That was because Gong Xiang had been infected by the pink death. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for them to kill Gong Xiang. Although Pan Lin and the others were far from being a half-step immortal emperor, they had more than 10 immortal kings. However, they had over a dozen immortal monarchs. Although Murong Yu was an immortal king, he didn't have an immortal monarch expert like Gong Hong by his side. With Murong Yu's strength, it was extremely difficult for him to kill these immortal dukes. Of course, it wasn't impossible. As long as Murong Yu took out the yin-yang cauldron or used the yin-yang bow and sky-shaking arrow, he could still kill them. However, Murong Yu was not willing to use the sky-shaking arrow again. As for the yin-yang cauldron, unless these people did not resist, it would be very difficult for Murong Yu to burn them to death with the yin-yang fire. However, Murong Yu was not in a hurry. These people had already been infected by the pink death. Sooner or later, it would act up. If they did not have the male and female harmony, they would definitely die. And in the immortal land, if they wanted to rush out, they would probably fall into a place where the flow of time was terrifying. That would undoubtedly be courting death. However, what made Murong depressed was that among these people, there were many female immortals. There were female immortals in the 9 heavens, Xian immortal, immortal king, and even immortal dukes. These female immortals must die. Murong's eyes flashed with a cold, killing intent. Once these female immortals and the other male immortals reached a balance of yin and yang, the pink morning spell would lose its effect. Therefore, Murong had to kill these female immortals to prevent them from reaching a balance of yin and yang and remove the pink morning spell. Chapter 586. First, he had to kill all the female immortals here and stop them from balancing their yin and yang. Then, he could get rid of the pink death poison. Hence, Murong made his move. Rumble. The void suddenly shattered, and a long black spear appeared. The spear carried with it an aura that could destroy the heavens and the earth. It broke through the obstruction of the void with lightning speed and stabbed directly into the body of a female immortal king. Bang! Under the full force of Murong's 7,500 dragon strength, the female immortal king was blasted into a bloody mist without even making a sound. She was deader than dead. After killing this female immortal king in a single strike, the black spear disappeared into thin air, as if it had never appeared. If not for the fact that the female immortal king was still in the void, the surrounding people might not have even realized that someone had ambushed them. And this was only the beginning. After killing the female immortal king, Murong re-entered the Hichu Luoshu world. When he reappeared, another female, 9 heavens Xian immortal was killed by him. Soon, dozens of female immortals had died in Murong's hands. At this moment, the Clear Stream sect and the other powers had gathered together and were on guard against Murong's sudden ambush. Within the world of He-Tu and Luoshu, Murong slightly furrowed his brows. Although he'd already killed dozens of female immortals, there were still several hundred female immortals among the 7,000 to 8,000 immortals. In fact, Murong had already seen some immortals grab hold of a female immortal and start venting their flames on the spot. And these people were all gathered together, making it difficult for Murong to launch a sneak attack, especially those immortal monarchs. Once they realized that something was wrong with the space, they would attack and disperse Murong's attack. If there was an immortal Emperor Realm expert, he would be able to kill all of them. Even an immortal Monarch Realm expert would be able to kill many people. Murong frowned and thought to himself, he didn't have any immortal emperors. On the other hand, Solitary Darkness wasn't one of his people. He had merely stayed by his side to protect him for 100,000 years. However, he didn't have an immortal emperor, but he did have an immortal monarch expert. Gong Hong, Feng Province, Feng City. Gong Hong didn't show up in public because of the devil sex matters. Instead, he secretly guarded Feng City. Although the current strength of Feng City was so strong that there was no need for him to show up. However, he strictly carried out Murong's orders. At this moment, he was resting in his room with his eyes closed. Suddenly, Gong Hong felt something and opened his eyes. Layers of ripples appeared in the void in front of his eyes. Then, the void split open, and a figure appeared in front of him. It was Murong. When he saw Murong, Gong Hong was about to stand up and greet him. However, Murong said telepathically, "Gong Hong, don't resist." Then, Gong Hong felt a force acting on his body. Then, the scene in front of him changed, and he disappeared from the room. He had entered Hichu Luoshu. Gong Hong, try your best to kill those female immortals later. In Hichu Luoshu, Murong briefly explained the matter. Of course, he didn't say that it was in the immortal land. He only said that time passed very quickly there. The distance between Feng Province and Qinghe Province was very far. If Gong Hong found out that they had appeared in the immortal land in a flash, he would know the secret of Hichu Luo Shu. Although Gong Hong was completely under Murong Yu's control, he didn't need to know. Murong Yu still wouldn't let him know. Whoosh! In just a few breaths, Murong Yu and solitary darkness appeared in the immortal land. Kill! As soon as Gong Hong appeared, he roared in his heart. A terrifying force condensed into a big hand and slammed it down. Boom! After an earth-shattering sound, everything within a radius of 10,000 miles was shattered by Gong Hong's slap. At least 1,000 immortals, including 9 Heaven Xian immortals and immortal kings, died under Gong Hong's slap. Seeing this, Murong Yu was speechless. It's awesome to be strong, Murong Yu thought helplessly. Just now, he had only killed a few dozen female immortals by means of sneak attacks. Gong Hong's palm strike, on the other hand, had killed off some ascendant immortals, including over 100 female immortals. After the slap, Gong Hong felt a force acting on his body. However, he didn't resist. His figure flashed and disappeared on the spot. Once again, he entered Hichu Luo Shu. Rumble. The moment Gong Hong Gang disappeared, countless forces poured down from the sky, smashing the place where Gong Hong Gang had been. The Pink Death. After entering Hichu Luo Shu, Gong Hong wiped away a drop of cold sweat on his forehead. This was because he was a little scared when he saw the forces tearing the void apart. If Murong Yu hadn't pulled him into Hichu Luo Shu in time, he would have been dead by now. At the same time, he also noticed the situation of the people outside. It was because he had been hit by the Pink Death. Not many people knew about the Pink Morning, but Gong Hong knew about it, because he had been afflicted by the Pink Morning before. Gong Hong, I will open a crack in the spatial treasure. Can you attack from here? You just need to kill those female immortals. Murong Yu said in a low voice. His expression was a little ugly. Even though Gong Hong was an immortal monarch expert, he still couldn't go on a killing spree in the outside world. Yes, Gong Hong said in a low voice. Thus, Murong Yu opened Hichu Luo Shu. At the same time, Gong Hong made his move. Waves of forces bombarded the female immortals, killing them one by one. Their target is the female immortals. Pan Lin said with a gloomy expression, Aphrodisiac. Could it be that the key to dispelling these aphrodisiacs is women? Kong Pei suddenly guessed. Perhaps. Protect these female immortals. Xieze's expression was gloomy. He suddenly stretched out his hand and pulled the female immortals who had been hit by the Pink Death over. I want it. The female immortals' Pink Death had already erupted. At this moment, their entire bodies were crimson, and their eyes were filled with intense lust. Their clothes had already been shredded by their own desire. When they appeared by Xieze's side, they pounced on him one by one. Oof. Seeing this, Xieze snorted coldly and released a wave of energy to imprison them. At the same time, the other immortal lords also made their move. In the blink of an eye, dozens of female immortals had been captured by them, and they were temporarily restrained by their powers. However, even though these female immortals were immobilized, they were still restless. They kept making humph sounds, and the smell of lust quickly spread. At this moment, the only female immortal monarch among the dozen or so immortal monarchs let out a low growl. Then, she grabbed a male immortal king and flew into the distance with a sway of her figure. What's going on? Seeing this, Pan Lin and the others were shocked and confused. It seems like she was also poisoned. The symptoms on her body are the same as these women. An immortal lord who was standing beside the female immortal lord said in a low voice. He clearly saw that the female immortal lord's body was also red. Even immortal kings can be attacked. Hearing this, the remaining immortal monarchs were all shocked. Then, they began to check their bodies. Their physical bodies were fine. When they saw that their physical bodies were fine, they couldn't help but heave a sigh of relief. However, one of the immortal monarchs checked his soul out of curiosity. My soul has been invaded by the pink gas. When he saw that his soul had been invaded by the pink gas, he couldn't help but exclaim. Everyone's expression changed instantly, and they all checked their souls. When they saw it, their expressions became extremely ugly. This was because they all realized that their souls had also been invaded. Then, They looked at the souls of the women in front of them who were imprisoned by them. Finally, they realized what had happened. The pink mourning was something that directly affected the soul. The reason why they were fine for now was because they were relatively strong and the pink gas hadn't exploded yet. When they thought of the miserable state of those who had been infected by the pink gas, Pan Lin and the others couldn't help but feel a lingering fear. Then, they looked at the women in front of them, and their hearts relaxed. They had already guessed that the key to coming into contact with the pink gas was probably these women. At this moment, an extremely shrill scream came from afar. Judging by the voice, it seemed to be from the woman who had just left. Pan Lin and the others' expressions changed, and they grabbed the women in front of them and rushed over. However, when they rushed over, they only saw a cloud of blood mist drifting in the void. The female immortal lord was nowhere to be seen. "She's been killed," Xieze said with a gloomy expression. Kong Pei's expression darkened as he released a wave of energy. Then, an image appeared in front of them. It was the image of the female immortal lord being killed. The one who had attacked was Gong Hong. In fact, this was because Gong Hong and Murong Yu worked together. Using Gong Hong's strength and the yin-yang flame, Murong Yu easily killed the female immortal lord. Luckily, I brought Gong Hong. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable, Murong Yu thought to himself. Earlier, when he saw the female immortal lord capture the male immortal lord, he was shocked. He had been thinking about not letting the male immortal lord and the female immortal lord achieve sexual intercourse. He had never thought that the female immortal lord would take the initiative. "Let's hurry and leave this place." Pan Lin's expression darkened. He grabbed the female immortals and shot out in the direction they had come from, wanting to escape danger. As for the others, he didn't care. In this situation, he didn't care. Saving his own life was the most important thing. At the same time, the other immortal lords did the same. They all sped up and quickly retreated in the direction they had come. Chapter 587. Are they going to escape? Seeing this, Murong Yu's brows furrowed. If more than a dozen powerful immortal monarchs were to escape, with Murong Yu's current strength, even with Gong Hong's help, they wouldn't be able to stop them. However, Murong Yu didn't want these people to leave the immortal land. After all, he didn't want the whole world to know that he had the Black Lotus. Now, Murong Yu had enough enemies. The Immortal Palace and the Devil Sect were his enemies. Once the news that he had the Black Lotus spread, Murong Yu would definitely become the enemy of the whole world. Once this happened, his heavenly court, Shenzhen, and even the Celestial Palace might be obliterated. This was something that Murong Yu didn't want to see. Now, although Murong Yu had offended the Immortal Palace and the Devil Sect, because he was the enforcer of the Heavenly Penalty Palace, the people of the Immortal Palace and the Devil Sect wouldn't deal with him on a large scale. Even if the Immortal Palace suspected that he had the Hichu Luo Shu, they wouldn't dare to deal with Murong Yu on a large scale. After all, the Heavenly Penalty Palace wasn't weak. It had the same strength as them. Even if the Heavenly Penalty Palace of the Heaven Realm was included, the three giants of the immortal world wouldn't be taken seriously by the Heavenly Penalty Palace. Of course, the reason why the Immortal Palace didn't openly deal with Murong Yu wasn't only because of the Heavenly Punishing Palace, but also because of the He Tu and the inscription of Luo. They guessed that if Murong Yu was forced into a corner, he might expose the Hichu Luo Shu. At that time, it would be even more difficult for them to get the Hichu Luo Shu. Now, the Immortal Palace's approach was to take down Murong Yu in one fell swoop. However, Murong Yu's whereabouts were often erratic. It was difficult for the Immortal Palace to take action against him. Moreover, if he wasn't in the Hichu Luo Shu, there would be an Immortal Emperor Realm expert next to him when he was outside. Under such circumstances, if the Immortal Palace wanted to take down Murong Yu, they would have to send out several Immortal Emperors. Once they sent out several Immortal Emperors, it would attract the attention of other forces. Therefore, at this stage, they did not send out experts to deal with Murong Yu. Instead, they only sent out their subordinate forces. Gong Hong, when you attack, use this to kill the weaker ones first. Moronyu said in a deep voice as he handed over the yin-yang cauldron, which had transformed into the size of an incense burner. Gong Hong nodded and took the yin-yang cauldron in his hand. Although he didn't know what use this seemingly ordinary little cauldron had, but since Moronyu had given it to him, it must be of great use. If Gong Hong had known that the seemingly unremarkable cauldron in his hand was the yin-yang universe cauldron, and that the yin-yang fire that erupted from it could easily burn him to ashes, he probably wouldn't have dared to touch the yin-yang universe cauldron. Rumble. While everyone was fleeing with explosive speed, Gong Hong also made his move. In the Hichu Luoshu world, Gong Hong blasted his palm toward an expert who was only in the initial stage of the immortal monarch realm. The terrifying power shattered the void, bringing with it a terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth. It locked onto the immortal monarch and tore him apart rapidly. During this process, the yin-yang universe cauldron was hidden in front of Gong Hong's fist and was blasted directly toward the immortal monarch. The immortal monarch, who was being attacked by Gong Hong, had already begun to experience the effects of the pink death. However, he, who was fleeing for his life, also felt the danger. He snorted coldly and threw a punch at Gong Hong. He wanted to disperse Gong Hong's power, or at least stop Gong Hong's power. Rumble. After a deafening sound, the two fists collided violently. Following that, an extremely terrifying shockwave swept out in all directions with the place where the two fists collided as the center. Chi-Chi, wherever the impact passed, the void was directly annihilated. Puff! The few female immortals that the immortal monarch brought along were directly turned into a cloud of blood mist by the terrifying impact. They died an unnatural death. When the two fists collided violently, the yin-yang universe cauldron that was originally attached to Gong Hong's fist was also thrown out by him. It instantly approached the immortal monarch. Burn for me. Morongyu's mental strength had been attached to the yin-yang universe cauldron all this time. When he saw the yin-yang universe cauldron approaching the immortal monarch, he roared in his heart and ignited the yin-yang fire of the yin-yang universe cauldron. Rumble. With a sound, the yin-yang fire exploded violently. Like a giant wild beast, it instantly engulfed the expert who was only in the initial stage of the immortal monarch realm. The fire only flashed by for a moment before it disappeared. At the same time, the immortal monarch realm expert also disappeared along with the yin-yang fire. Gong Hong was shocked to see this scene. Only now did he remember that Moronyu had also used the yin-yang fire when he killed Gong Xiang. However, when Moronyu took out the yin-yang universe cauldron, it was very different from the miniature version. At this moment, when he saw that the inconspicuous cauldron that was like an incense burner actually contained such a terrifying yin-yang fire, Gong Hong's heart tightened. These yin-yang fire could even burn Gong Xiang to death, let alone him. Gong Hong continued to attack. Seeing that Gong Hong was stunned, Moronyu couldn't help but roar in a low voice. Gong Hong's body shook violently. He reached out his hand to grab the yin-yang universe cauldron and attacked the other immortal monarch. However, when he grabbed the yin-yang universe cauldron, Gong Hong's heart tightened. He was afraid that Moronyu would accidentally let the yin-yang fire escape. If that happened, Gong Hong would die in grievance. After killing this immortal monarch, other than the strongest Pan Lin, Xie, and Kong Pei, the remaining 10 or so immortal monarchs all had their pink death activated. At this moment, their bodies were flushed red as if they were oozing blood. Their eyes shone with an intense, lustful light as their bodies were controlled by lust. As a result, their strength and reflexes all dropped by a level. They couldn't recover their peak strength. Now that Gong Hong was working with the yin-yang universe cauldron, he was killing everything in his path. Truly, if God stood in his way, he would slay immortals. The pink mourning had completely taken effect. Not only did it confuse their minds, but it also invaded their souls. Once their souls were damaged, they naturally couldn't maintain their peak strength. In fact, their strength continued to drop. Strength was a combination of many aspects, not just pure physical strength. Apart from physical strength, there were other factors such as battle techniques, cultivation methods, weapons, and even perception and reflexes. As for the immortals who'd been hit by the pink morning, their strength might not be weakened. However, their perception and reflexes were far from normal. As a result, their combat skills, cultivation methods, and even divine weapons and Dharma treasures were affected. Therefore, their strength naturally declined rapidly. Bam! 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 Gong Hong was having a great time killing immortals. He was so excited that he wanted to throw his head back and howl at the sky when he saw immortals of the same level as him being killed. Normally, it would have been extremely difficult for him to kill immortals of the same level as him. After all, their strength was about the same. Unless he had overwhelming strength, it would be difficult to kill an immortal lord. After all, immortal lords were quite good at escaping. In a short period of time, Gong Hong had killed more than a dozen immortal lords. Even the female immortals were killed. These immortals had died in aggrieved circumstances. However, this was also due to their strength. They were all early-stage immortals of the same level as Gong Hong. Moreover, they'd been hit by the Pink Death, and Gong Hong had the help of the Yin-Yang Universe Cauldron. Killing them was as easy as slaughtering dogs. However, Pan Lin, Xie Zhe, and Kong Pei had already fled far away. However, Murongyu knew that they might not be able to escape this paradise. This was because the Pink Death in their souls had already acted up while they were fleeing. Blinded by lust, they might have accidentally entered a place where the flow of time was extremely fast. They might have been killed by the power of time. However, there was also the possibility that they might have slept with the female immortals in their hands. Through this, Yin and Yang could be reconciled and neutralize the poison of the Pink Death. My lord, they've escaped. Gong Hong, who was having a great time killing, also discovered this fact. Therefore, he nervously reported to Murongyu, afraid that Murongyu would blame him. Murongyu's expression was extremely gloomy. He really wanted to tell himself that Pan Lin and the others wouldn't leave this paradise. However, this was only his most ideal idea. In reality, they had a 50% chance of escaping or dying in this paradise. If he couldn't see them being killed with his own eyes, Murongyu wouldn't be able to relax. However, the three immortals were all powerful immortals. Murongyu couldn't track them at all. Even with Gong Hong's strength, he couldn't track them. Gong Hong, do you have any way to track them? Murongyu looked at Gong Hong with a gloomy expression. Gong Hong was anxious, but he still forced himself to say, My lord, there's really no way. They're much stronger than me. I can't track them. Murongyu's expression became even more gloomy. However, he also knew that the flow of time here was different. The aura of Pan Lin and the others would be quickly erased by the power of time. It would be difficult to track them down, unless Murongyu had the strength of an immortal emperor. However, if Murongyu had the strength of an immortal emperor, he wouldn't need Gong Hong. He could kill these immortal immortals with a single slap. Are we just going to let go like this? Murongyu thought unwillingly. It would be fine if they died in this paradise. However, if they didn't die, he would become the enemy of the entire world. Although the immortal world was huge, he would no longer have a foothold in it. All of a sudden, Murongyu felt a weak fluctuation enter his mind. Murongyu was stunned at first. Then, he revealed an ecstatic expression. Black Lotus, you said you can track them? It turned out that the weak wave was transmitted to him by Black Lotus. Moreover, Black Lotus said that he could track Pan Lin and the others. How could Murongyu not be surprised? Chapter 588. While Murongyu was excited by Black Lotus's words, Black Lotus's faint, almost imperceptible mind wave once again entered Murongyu's mind. It probably meant that he could track Pan Lin and the other two. Murongyu could not suppress his excitement. Black Lotus could actually track Pan Lin and the other two. In his excitement, Murongyu did not find it strange because Black Lotus was good at space law. For Black Lotus, who was good at space law, tracking people might be a small matter. After all, even though the flow of time in the immortal land was different, the aura left by Pan Lin and the others in the void would be erased very quickly. However, they had left their aura in the void after all. Black Lotus, who was good at space law, could track them based on the imperceptible aura they left behind. In his excitement, Murong finally came to his senses. It seemed that after the Black Lotus entered his body, there was a faint connection between him and the Black Lotus. It was this connection that allowed Black Lotus to transmit its faint mind wave into Murong mind. Otherwise, if there was no connection between them, perhaps Murong would not have been able to sense Black Lotus's faint mind wave at all. It was because these waves were so weak that they could not be sensed. With a thought, Murong had already arrived in his Dantian. At this time, he saw that Black Lotus, which was originally growing in the Immortal Land, had taken root under the tall Tree of Life. Under the Tree of Life that was 500,000 miles tall, Black Lotus was inconspicuous and could not even be seen. However, it was impossible for Murong not to notice Black Lotus's existence. However, looking at Black Lotus taking root under the Tree of Life, Murong felt a little strange. This was because there was no land or lake in his Dantian. There was only power. It did not grow in the lake, but in his Dantian. Murong couldn't help but feel a strange sensation. Of course, what made Murong speechless was that the current Black Lotus was exactly the same as the 9 Black Lotuses in his Dantian. I don't know. Is there really a connection between them? Murong couldn't help but think of Hichu again. This was because Hichu had once said that the Black Lotus in the Immortal Realm was almost the same as the Black Lotus in Murong's body. At this time, the Black Lotus rooted in the Dantian seemed to have integrated into the Dantian, which was why it had a faint connection with Murong. Of course, Murong also felt that there were some differences in other places, but he didn't have time to look at the Black Lotus now. Anyway, the Black Lotus was in his Dantian, and he had plenty of time to study in the future. Black Lotus, help me track those 3 immediately. You must not let them leave the fairyland. Do you understand? They're the ones who almost killed you. Murong said to Black Lotus in a deep voice. A faint fluctuation sounded in Murong's mind, and then a route appeared in Murong's mind. It was the escape route of Pan Lin, Xieze, and Kong Pei. In fact, Murong, you could even see the traces they'd left behind in the air. Those were 3 completely different colored threads that had been left in the void, extending from outside the Black Lake to the distance. The 3 different colored threads represented the aura and traces left in the void by Pan Lin and the other 2. These are the traces and aura left by Pan Lin and the other 2 in Black Lotus's eyes. When Murong saw the colored threads in his mind, he couldn't help but be shocked. Of course, he couldn't see this. What was shown in his mind was the world in Black Lotus's eyes. Only Black Lotus could see the world. Murong didn't ask why. Although he was very curious, he didn't have the time now. After putting Gong Hong into the Hichu Luo Shu, Murong's figure flashed, and he directly rose into the air, chasing along the threads left in his mind. The colored threads weren't very long, because Black Lotus couldn't sense very long distances. However, after Murong crossed the distance, Black Lotus transmitted the scene in his mind to Murong's mind, so that Murong would continue to chase. During this process, Murong didn't slow down, because he was following the route that Pan Lin and the other 2 had taken. Obviously, these were all safe routes. With a clear track and a clear route, Murong was extremely fast. It didn't take long for him to reach the mountainside of the peak. At this moment, Murong suddenly paused, because in the scene that Black Lotus had just transmitted to his mind, one of the colored threads was no longer with the other 2 threads, but bent to the side. Among the 3 of them, one of them can't hold on anymore. He must be looking for a place to have fun. Murong muttered in his mind, and his eyes flashed coldly, because Black Lotus only transmitted to the 3 colored threads, but didn't tell Murong which thread belonged to which one. Murong didn't know which one of the 3 people was the one who bent to the side. However, no matter who it was, Murong wouldn't let it go. With that thought in mind, Murong stopped in his tracks. Then, he turned around and chased after the thread on the side of the road. With He Lian's help, Murong quickly arrived in front of a secluded cave on a mountain peak. The highest peak was also littered with different mountain peaks. There wasn't just one mountain peak. The colored thread went straight into the cave. When Murong Yu came to the outside of the cave, he even heard the sound of heavy breathing and some movements coming from the cave. With a swish, Gong Hong appeared in front of the cave. Kill the people in the cave at all costs, no matter who they are, Murong Yu said in a deep voice. At the same time, he had secretly contacted Black Lotus in his Dantian. Black Lotus, can you lend me your rule of space? Help me temporarily seal this space and don't let them escape. Black Lotus' weak sigh wave came. The next moment, Murong Yu found that this void seemed to be confined by someone. Murong Yu was overjoyed. He didn't want to test whether this void was really confined. He believed in Black Lotus who had the rule of space. Gong Hong, do it, Murong Yu shouted. Then Gong Hong rushed into the cave. Then, a series of loud noises came from the cave, followed by waves of angry roars. The mountain where the cave was located was destroyed by a terrifying force. Then, Murong Yu saw Murong Yu fighting with a naked expert. Waves of terrifying power burst out, forcing Murong Yu to retreat. Xieze. Murong Yu's eyes couldn't help but flash with a cold glint when he saw her naked body. This guy almost killed him in the past, and he had been brooding about it. Originally, Xieze's strength was at least at the intermediate immortal monarch realm, which was much stronger than Gong Hong. Under normal circumstances, Gong Hong wouldn't be a match for Xieze at all. However, the current situation wasn't normal. The Pink Death had taken effect and directly weakened Xieze's strength by a few percent. Now his strength was about the same as Gong Hong's. Therefore, Gong Hong was able to fight with him until the sky collapsed and the earth cracked. It was a very tragic fight. At this moment, Xieze was completely blinded by lust. Just now, he was fighting with the few female immortals. However, before he could vent his anger, and before they could have sex, Gong Hong had already charged over and blasted the female immortals into smithereens. This made Xieze, who had lost his rationality and was controlled by lust, extremely furious. This was because even though he had lost all his rationality and was completely controlled by lust, he still couldn't control himself. However, he also felt that if Gong Hong had been a little slower, he might have already gotten rid of the Pink Death. Now, it could be said that he had failed at the last step. Therefore, the furious Xieze kept roaring, wanting to kill Gong Hong. However, the Pink Death was getting stronger and stronger, and it had already started to corrode his soul. Because of this, his strength was rapidly declining. His soul was being invaded, which meant that the Pink Death wasn't just affecting his lust. It had already started to destroy his soul. In this situation, Gong Hong couldn't kill him at all. All he needed to do was keep him occupied and prevent him from having sex. Soon, Xieze's soul would be destroyed by the Pink Death. Of course, the speed of destruction was determined by the strength of Xieze's soul. However, it was a little difficult to destroy Xieze's soul in a short period of time. Besides, there was still Pan Lin and Kong Pei. Gong Hong, kill him! Murong Yu roared. Murderous intent surged in his heart as a terrifying aura emanated from his body. 7,500 units of coiled dragon power exploded from his body. In addition to the increase in strength from the battle character art, Murong Yu's battle strength had almost doubled. He had at least 10,000 units of coiled dragon power. Die! With a low roar, Murong Yu's figure flashed and disappeared from the spot. When he reappeared, the Black Phoenix spear had already pierced through the sky and stabbed fiercely at Xieze, who was fighting Gong Hong. Because Gong Hong had the yin-yang fire, Xieze had been suppressed, which made him very angry. At this moment, when he saw that a mere golden immortal like Murong Yu dared to attack him, he couldn't help but roar again and again. With a flash, he abandoned Gong Hong and charged straight at Murong Yu. Boom! After an earth-shattering explosion, Murong Yu was directly sent flying, spitting out blood in the void. Chapter 589. Murong Yu originally had 7,500 coiling dragon power, which was already considered a mid-level immortal king. Although his dragon power did not increase with the help of the fighting character art, his combat strength increased by 2,000 to 3,000 dragon power, reaching 10,000 dragon power. Even so, the person he was facing was a high immortal. Even though Xieze's strength was constantly declining, he was still definitely above the immortal king realm. Even though this immortal king was invincible below the immortal monarch, he was still no match for Xieze. As a result, Murong was sent flying by Xieze's frightening power the instant the two of them collided. This was because he had used the Hichu Luo Shu. The injuries he suffered were even more terrifying. Even so, the blood in his body churned wildly, and several meridians were shattered. If not for the fact that his body was still at the pinnacle of a grade 9 immortal artifact, he would have been shattered. At this moment, Murong-Yu's body was also sore from the bombardment. After sending Murong-Yu flying, Xieze's figure was forced to stop. After all, his strength was not as strong as before. Although he had sent Murong-Yu flying, Murong-Yu had also successfully blocked his body. At this moment, Gong Hong let out a loud roar and charged over. His violent strength exploded again, and he started fighting with Xieze again. The two of them fought again, and it was earth-shattering. However, under the control of Black Lotus's spatial rules, their battle could only be confined to this place, and they could not leave at all. One could imagine how powerful Black Lotus's spatial control was. Ah! Xieze suddenly roared. His eyes were bloodshot, and his aura was rapidly declining. If Murong-Yu and the others could see Xieze's soul at this moment, they would see that his soul was rapidly being eroded by the pink death, and it was about to be destroyed. Die! Gong Hong roared angrily and sent Xieze flying with a punch. At the same time, he controlled the Yin-Yang Cauldron to attack. This was the first time the Yin-Yang Cauldron was so close to Xieze. Once the Yin-Yang fire exploded, Xieze would not be able to escape. Seeing this, how could Murong-Yu not seize this opportunity? With a thought, the Yin-Yang flame in the Yin-Yang Cauldron burst out. Whoosh wherever the Yin-Yang fire passed. Xieze had no time to push it away. In fact, his reaction speed had dropped to a terrifying level. Even in the face of the Yin-Yang flame, he could no longer react effectively. Thus, the Yin-Yang flame directly enveloped him, following which a high immortal was annihilated just like that. Not even his ashes remained. I finally killed it. Gong Hong's face was filled with excitement. Xieze's strength was at least at the intermediate stage of the immortal monarch realm. With his strength, how could he not be excited to be able to kill such a powerful enemy? Under the treatment of the powerful and terrifying life force, Murong-Yu's tumbling blood and qi had already been suppressed. The injuries that Xieze had inflicted on him had also completely healed. What a terrifying recovery ability. After putting the excited Gong Hong into the Hichu Luo Shu world, Murong-Yu quickly left this place. After returning to the fork in the road, Murong-Yu continued his pursuit. Pan Lin, Kong Pei. Soon, Murong-Yu discovered another colorful thread that had turned to the other side. Murong-Yu pondered for a moment, then continued his pursuit. Kong Pei. When Murong-Yu discovered Kong Pei, he was shocked to see that Kong Pei wasn't doing anything with the female immortals in his hands. Instead, he was sitting cross-legged in a cave by himself. It seemed like he was expelling the poison. As for the female immortals who had been struck by the pink morning, they were already lying dead on the ground. Their auras were completely gone, and their souls had been completely destroyed. Murong-Yu came to a sudden realization at the sight of this. Kong Pei was powerful, so the pink morning took a long time to take effect. However, the female immortals had long since taken effect. In this period of time, the female immortals had not obtained the yin-yang harmony. They were completely unable to resist the pink morning's destruction of their souls. In the end, their souls were destroyed before Xieze's pink morning could fully take effect. As for Kong Pei, who was sitting cross-legged and trying to expel the poison, he was now covered in blood. His appearance was horrifying and terrifying. Even if this guy can continue holding on, he won't be able to hold on for much longer. Murong-Yu thought to himself, then immediately retreated. He believed that without the yin-yang harmony, Kong Pei would be dead without a doubt. There was no need for him to do anything. This was because Kong Pei could not even be detected by Murong Yu, who was close at hand. However, before he left, Murong Yu did not let Kong Pei off. The sky was filled with pink death, and the entire cave was submerged. Furthermore, after covering the entire cave with the pink morning, Murong Yu had ordered Black Lotus to seal off the space around it. This way, the pink morning would not be able to escape this space, and Kong Pei would not be able to escape. The most terrifying thing was that the newly added pink morning could accelerate the rate at which his soul was being eroded. Under such circumstances, Kong Pei would not be able to hold on for too long. In fact, not long after Murong Yu left, Kong Pei, who had been sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly stopped breathing. His soul had been destroyed, and he could not be more dead. At this moment, Murong Yu had already left the highest peak after chasing after Pan Lin. How could Pan Lin hold on for so long? Murong Yu had followed him all the way down and had already walked quite a distance. In the process, he discovered a few female immortals who had died. These female immortals had died because their souls had been destroyed. Murong Yu scanned their bodies with his spiritual force, but did not find any signs of them being violated. This meant that Pan Lin had not touched them at all. Could Pan Lin have been cured? But that's impossible. A trace of doubt flashed across Murong Yu's mind. The number of female immortals who had died on the road was the same as the number Pan Lin had taken away. Could it be that Pan Lin also has a spatial treasure? There are women in it? Murong Yu guessed. This was the only guess he could make. Pan Lin was only an immortal lord. If he had not been dealt with, he would not have been able to hold on for so long. When he thought about how Pan Lin had been cured and how he had obtained the pink morning, the news of the Black Lotus would spread and the entire world would know. When that happened, he would become the enemy of the entire world. Murong Yu was helpless. However, Murong Yu did not give up. He continued to give chase. Not long after, he finally relaxed, because he had already seen Pan Lin lying on the road, dead as a doornail. This guy's situation should be the same as Kong Pei's. He had not been able to touch the female immortals in time, and they had all died. Then, his pink morning would be fully activated. Without the balance of yin and yang, Pan Lin's soul would be annihilated. After taking Pan Lin's storage ring, Murong Yu burned Pan Lin's body to ashes with the yin-yang flame. Then, he entered Hichu Luoshu and returned to Feng City. After leaving Gong Hong in Feng City, Murong Yu once again teleported to the mountain in the Wonderland. His only purpose in entering the Wonderland was to find the Heaven's punishment token. As for the Black Lotus, it was an unexpected gain. Even if he could not find the Heaven's punishment token, Murong Yu had gained a lot from this trip to the Wonderland. While Murong Yu began to search for the Heaven's punishment token on the highest peak of the Wonderland, the Clear River sect, the Power sect, the White Profound sect, and other sects had gathered in Qinghe province. This was because not long ago, they had all discovered that the soul crystals of their disciples were constantly shattering. Finally, they discovered that the soul crystals of the immortals who had entered the Wonderland had also shattered. In the end, they were shocked to discover that the soul crystals of all the people who had entered the Wonderland had all shattered. In other words, these people were all dead. More than 10,000 experts were all dead. Moreover, they had all died in the same day. This made them suspicious. Therefore, they all gathered together again. However, unlike the smaller sects who were very anxious about this matter, the three major forces in Qinghe province, such as the Clear River sect, were different. They were all super forces with immortal emperors in charge. Although the death of an expert in the immortal realm was a great loss to their forces, they could still afford to lose him. Most importantly, they were already mentally prepared for this. This was because the immortals who had entered the Wonderland this time were only cannon fodder. They were only there to check out the situation. However, what made them unhappy was that these people had all died, but there was no news about the Black Lotus. Did they find Black Lotus or not? Did the Black Lotus really exist in the Wonderland? They did not care about the lives of these people. They only cared about whether the Black Lotus existed in the Wonderland. While they were discussing whether or not they should set off for the Immortal Land again, Muronyu had already scouted out the entire mountain peak. However, what made Muronyu depressed was that he did not find anything. Of course, this was excluding the few places where the flow of time was extremely terrifying. Muronyu did not dare to enter those places. Even if he had a lifespan of 400 billion years, he might not be able to come out after entering. Black Lotus, is there anything strange on this peak? Muronyu had no choice but to ask Black Lotus. Black Lotus should have been on the peak for a long time. If there was anything on the peak, he should know very well. Sure enough, after Muronyu asked, he immediately received a weak mental fluctuation from Black Lotus in his mind. At the same time, a place appeared in his mind. Black Lotus, are you playing with me? Can I enter that place? Muronyu felt gloomy. The place Black Lotus was pointing at was a place where the flow of time was extremely fast, which he'd previously discovered. Chapter 590. It was a long canyon and it was barren inside. There were no plants or life forms. It was very quiet, terrifyingly quiet. The canyon was not uncommon on the peak of the mountain. It could even be said that it was very common. However, it was very strange that there were no signs of life. Back then, Muronyu did not enter the canyon rashly because he felt that it was strange. He only used his divine thought to check it out. After investigating, he was immediately taken aback. The flow of time in the canyon was simply too terrifying. It was just like those people he met when he first entered the immortal land. Muronyu did not doubt that even if he had a lifespan of 400 billion years, he would not have a good ending after entering the canyon. He might even be killed by the power of time. However, Muronyu was now standing in front of the canyon with a distressed look. According to Black Lotus, there was most likely a special place in the canyon on the peak. However, the canyon was not very big and there were no obstacles. He could even see through it at a glance. Muronyu did not see what was different about the canyon, other than the fact that it was a little eerie. However, Muronyu had almost gone through the entire peak. Apart from this canyon, there were other places that were just as dangerous as this canyon. If the Heavenly Punishment Order was on the peak, it should be in one of these dangerous places. However, how could he go in? With his lifespan, he would probably die once he went in. Black Lotus, do I really have to go in? Muronyu asked Black Lotus in his heart with a distressed look. With the Heavenly Punishment Order, one could unify the Heavenly Punishment Palace and become the ruler of the Heavenly Punishment Palace. Furthermore, with the Heavenly Punishment Order, one could even punish on behalf of the Heavenly Punishment Palace and obtain great benefits. However, everything was based on one's life. If one's life was gone, so what if he had the Heavenly Punishment Order? Between his life and the Heavenly Punishment Order, Muronyu chose his life. Even without the Heavenly Punishment Order, he would only have one less incredible treasure. Therefore, he was unwilling to enter the canyon. The weak ripples once again entered Muronyu's mind, causing Muronyu to ponder. Black Lotus' intention was obvious. He wanted Muronyu to enter the canyon. Black Lotus want to harm him? Muronyu had never thought about this problem. After all, if Black Lotus wanted him dead, he would not have helped him to make a breakthrough in his strength. Moreover, he wouldn't have saved Muronyu before. Perhaps there really was a Tion Fa writ in the canyon. But how was he supposed to get in? Black Lotus, you let me enter this canyon again and again, but you also know that my lifespan is limited and I'm not immortal. Once I go in, I'm afraid I won't be able to get out. Do you have any ideas? Muronyu asked with a frown. I can help you block the power of time, so that time will not be able to invade your lifespan. A faint fluctuation was transmitted over. This time, Black Lotus' intention was clearly expressed. Muronyu, on the other hand, was shocked. The laws of space versus the laws of time? Black Lotus, can you do it? It was not that Muronyu did not believe in Black Lotus, but he needed to figure out how powerful Black Lotus space rules were. If he could not block the time rules, Muronyu would definitely be in trouble. At the same time, Muronyu transmitted his voice to Hichu and asked, Hichu, between the time rules and the space rules, which one is more powerful? The time rules and the space rules are one of the most powerful rules. They're almost the same in terms of lethality and other aspects. Of course, this is a comparison between the two rules of the same level. If we want to talk about which is more powerful, it depends on who controls the two rules. Hearing Murong use words, Murong Yu's heart suddenly tightened. The immortal land had existed for an unknown period of time. Who was controlling the time rules? No one knew. Maybe it was an ancient powerhouse who had fallen, or maybe the rules of heaven and earth were controlling the time rules. In short, the time rules had not dissipated for a long time and were extremely powerful. Relatively speaking, although the space rules controlled by Black Lotus were powerful, Murong Yu did not believe that Black Lotus space rules could fight against the time rules in the canyon. My space rules can completely prevent the time rules here from invading you. You will definitely be safe. Black Lotus weak fluctuations continued to sound in Murong Yu's mind. Really? Murong Yu confirmed again. Yes. Black Lotus mental fluctuations came again, making Murong Yu fall into deep thought again. Hichu, do you think I should take the risk and go in to take a look? Murong Yu was uncertain, so he asked Hichu, Young master, it's your decision whether to go in or not. If you think it's worth the risk, go in. If not, don't go in. Whether you go in or not depends on your own heart. As for me, I can only do my best to save you when you're in danger, he too said indifferently. I'll go all out this time. However, Hichu, once you encounter danger, you must pull me into the Hichu Luoshu and teleport away immediately. I will also try to use the power of origin to teleport directly back to the Huaxia cultivation world. After thinking for a while, Murong Yu decided to take the risk. Black Lotus, let's start. I'm going in. Before Murong Yu's voice fell, he saw layers of ripples in the space around him. It was as if an invisible shield had enveloped him. What surprised Murong Yu the most was that when this invisible shield enveloped him, the flow of time in the space around him immediately slowed down by many times. Originally, the flow of time on the peak was 1 or 200,000 times faster than outside. At this time, the flow of time in Murong Yu's space was 1 or 200,000 times slower than outside. In other words, the flow of time in Murong Yu's space was the same as the flow of time in the immortal world outside. It was the normal flow of time. What a powerful spatial law. Murong Yu's face was filled with shock. However, this was also what he wanted to see. The stronger Black Lotus's spatial law was, the safer he would be. I'm going in. Murong Yu took a deep breath and stepped into the canyon. After taking a step, Murong Yu didn't continue forward. Instead, he stood in place and watched the situation. The space around Murong Yu was still rippling in a regular pattern. These ripples were the effect of Black Lotus's spatial law, which was the spatial shield. After entering the canyon, Murong Yu clearly felt that the time outside was passing quickly. However, after these time forces came into contact with Black Lotus's spatial shield, they were all transferred away by the shield's power. They either brushed past him or were directly transferred into the spatial turbulence. The layers of ripples on the spatial shield were still so regular. They weren't disrupted by the time forces. After standing in place for a while, Murong Yu was finally convinced that the time forces in the canyon couldn't do anything to the spatial shield on the surface of his body. This made him feel at ease. At the same time, he sighed at the power of the spatial law. However, although he knew that the time forces outside couldn't hurt him for the time being, Murong Yu still walked forward cautiously. 1 li, 5 li, 100 li. Soon, Murong Yu was 10,000 li deep into the canyon. During this process, Murong Yu's speed gradually increased. He could already feel how powerful the spatial laws of the Black Lotus were. Even at this time, the time forces still couldn't invade the spatial shield on the surface of his body. One could imagine how terrifying this spatial shield was. 1/10 of the distance. But I didn't find anything. Murong Yu frowned slightly. The entire canyon was about 100,000 li long. Now, Murong Yu was already 1/10 of the way, but he still didn't feel any news of the heavenly punishment order. Well, the sheepskin scroll is the key to getting the heavenly punishment order. It's the key. Could it be? Murong Yu suddenly thought of the sheepskin scroll. He immediately took it out. Xiao Xiao, As soon as the sheepskin scroll was taken out of Hichu Luo Shu, it trembled violently. It even wanted to break free from Murong Yu's hand and fly away. The sheepskin scroll's strange behavior made Murong Yu's heart skip a beat. Could it be that the heavenly punishment order is really here? Murong Yu's face flashed with a touch of joy, and then he walked in the direction where the sheepskin scroll was struggling. He was close. When Murong Yu crossed another 30,000 miles, the sheepskin scroll in his hand trembled even more violently. In fact, it was even emitting rays of light. It's here! When the sheepskin scroll in Murong Yu's hand suddenly burst into a dazzling light, Murong Yu was already sure that the heavenly punishment order, or rather, the treasure mentioned in the sheepskin scroll was here. However, what puzzled Murong Yu was the fact that he was currently facing a stone wall that was several 100,000 feet tall. It was completely bare, and there was nothing on it. The only thing that made it look like a mirror reflected a faint light. Could it be that there's some mystery here? Murong Yu thought to himself. When he was about to observe this bare stone wall, to see if there was any mystery, suddenly, a strong force erupted from the sheepskin scroll in his hand. Caught off guard, Murong Yu didn't grab the sheepskin scroll. Suddenly, the sheepskin scroll broke free from his hand and turned into a fine light. It actually broke through the space shield set up by Black Lotus and rushed straight toward the stone wall. What's going on? Murong Yu saw that the sheepskin scroll had effortlessly penetrated the space shield and couldn't help but be shocked. What made him even more surprised was that when a sheepskin scroll rushed to the front of the bare stone wall and was about to hit it, the stone wall suddenly changed. Chapter 591. The stone wall, which was hundreds of thousands of feet high, was bare and as smooth as a mirror, reflecting rays of light. With a swoosh, the sheepskin scroll that was emitting light directly hit the stone wall and disappeared without a trace in a flash. At this moment, the huge stone wall began to change. The stone wall, which was originally as smooth as a mirror, began to distort rapidly. Rays of light continued to emit from the stone wall. Murong Yu saw that the tall stone wall was rapidly shrinking at this time, and the countless rays of light were getting stronger and stronger. Hundreds of thousands of feet, tens of thousands of feet, thousands of feet. In a few breaths of time, the huge stone wall had disappeared and became only a few hundred feet high. The endless rays of light became more and more intense, and even a little dazzling. Under the stimulation of these rays of light, the stone wall that was only a few hundred feet high quickly changed into a huge door at this time. At the sight of this, Murong Yu's face was filled with shock and stupefaction. What the hell is going on? Murong Yu was shocked. Does this door lead to other places? Is the heavenly punishment order over there? Murong Yu's suspicion and guess were not unreasonable, because the final treasure referred to by the sheepskin scroll was most likely the heavenly punishment order. In fact, the sheepskin scroll was the key to the treasure at the beginning. Judging from the current situation, it seemed that the treasure had been opened. That door should lead to the space of the treasure. Swish! While Murong Yu was deep in thought, an incomparably dazzling light suddenly shot out from the huge door. The powerful beam of light pierced through countless space-times and landed on Murong Yu's body before he could even react. Murong Yu didn't even have time to react before the scenery in front of him changed. He even saw himself rushing towards a door at high speed. Swish! Murong Yu directly crashed into the door, and the scene in front of him kept changing. The next moment, he appeared in a gray space. The strong light had disappeared at some point. However, what made Murong Yu a little relieved was that the space shield that Black Lotus had arranged on his body was still there. After contacting Hichu and Black Lotus at once, Murong Yu relaxed when he found that he could still contact them. Then he had a chance to look around. There were mountains and rivers here. It was exactly the same as the outside world. However, the sky here was dusky. Even the color of the void was dusky. Chaotic energy? Murong Yu frowned when he saw the grayish energy. This was because he discovered that the grayish energy wasn't the energy of heaven and earth. Instead, it was the energy of chaos. It was just that it contained a lot of impurities and was not pure primal chaos energy. Another demonic, mountain-like existence. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to survive here. The Fiend Mountain had a radius of 1,000,000 miles. The entire Fiend Mountain was enveloped in primal chaos energy. However, Moronyu knew that the reason the Devil Mountain was shrouded in chaos energy was because there was a chaos spiritual vein in the depths of the mountain. The chaos energy emitted by the chaos spiritual vein covered the entire Devil Mountain. Therefore, the Devil Mountain became a place with only chaos energy. Ordinary people wouldn't be able to survive here. This was because ordinary people wouldn't be able to absorb the chaos energy at all. Once their energy was depleted, they could only rely on various elixirs and immortal meridians to recover their energy. Looking around, this dusky space was much bigger than the Devil Mountain. At least, the Devil Mountain was only about 1,000,000 miles in radius. However, this place was at least dozens or hundreds of times bigger than the Devil Mountain. What exactly is this place? Moronyu searched his memory, but he couldn't remember anything about this place. He then asked Hichu, but Hichu didn't know either. The river diagram is here. Can I enter the river diagram and the Book of the Luo? Can I teleport? This was the question that Moronyu was most concerned about. It shouldn't be a problem. However, I can't sense the teleportation point outside. I can't teleport to the immortal world or the cultivation world. Moronyu frowned. If he couldn't teleport away, then he could only find the exit. However, where was the exit? Moronyu looked around. There was no exit at all. He had just been teleported here. It should have been random. Looks like I have to struggle again. Moronyu said helplessly. This was because he couldn't even sense the origin energy of the Huaxia cultivation world just now. In this special space, Moronyu couldn't rely on his methods to leave. The only way he could leave this place was to find the exit. After throwing a jade slip with a teleportation array nearby, Moronyu began his journey. Roar! Moronyu didn't walk for long. After climbing over a mountain, an angry roar came from in front of him. Then he saw that a huge rock that was originally in front of him suddenly moved. It didn't take long for it to form a huge giant. It was a stone man. Everything in the world could cultivate. Therefore, Moronyu wasn't surprised when he saw the stone man. After all, humans and demons weren't the only ones who could cultivate. There were other races as well. In fact, a life form formed from a stone man like this could also be considered a demon. Immortal King Realm? What made Moronyu frown was that the fierce aura emitted by this stone man indicated that he should be an Immortal King Realm expert. A stone man who had cultivated to the Immortal King Realm? If it was just a stone man, Moronyu wouldn't frown because of this. However, don't forget that he had just entered this space. Who knew how many experts there were here? The first person he encountered was an Immortal King Realm expert. Did that mean that the experts in this space were all very powerful? Would he encounter immortal lords or even immortal emperors in the future? Or was there an immortal venerable realm expert directly looking for Moronyu? These thoughts only flashed through Moronyu's mind for a moment before he threw them aside. But now wasn't the time to think about that. At this moment, the stone golem with a ferocious aura had already raised its gigantic fist that was several hundred meters in size. Like a divine mountain, it ruthlessly smashed down at Moronyu. In front of this huge fist, Moronyu was like an ant. However, this ant wasn't weak. With a flash, he had already retreated. Rumble! Just as Moronyu retreated, the stone man's huge fist had already landed on the ground where he was originally standing. Suddenly, a terrifying force exploded. The ground was immediately shattered by the powerful force as if there was a violent earthquake. Roar! Seeing that his attack didn't work, the stone man roared again. He crushed a huge mountain with one foot and rushed towards Moronyu. At the same time, his huge fist once again smashed towards Moronyu. You're courting death. Moronyu was furious. He had already given in once, but the stone man still attacked. This made him want to kill him. Rumble! Moronyu, who was full of killing intent, didn't retreat this time. He also punched out, smashing towards the stone man's fist that was a few hundred feet in size. In the eyes of outsiders, Murong Yu's entire body was only a few hundredths of the stone man's fist, but his fist was even smaller. In terms of size, there was a huge gap between the two sides. However, although Murong Yu's hand was small, it contained an extremely terrifying force. Rumble. Their fists collided fiercely, and a terrifying force exploded in an instant. An earth-shattering sound suddenly erupted, followed by a kacha sound. At the place where the two fists collided, the stone man's fist that was a few hundred feet in size had already been shattered. Although the giant had the strength of the Immortal King realm, Murong Yu's strength wasn't bad either. Although he was only at the Golden Immortal realm, ordinary Immortal Kings weren't his match. Although the giant had reached the Immortal King realm, his strength was inferior to Murong Yu's. Roar! Seeing that his fist had been shattered, the stone man let out another furious roar. His other fist quickly smashed towards Murong Yu. Dying! At this moment, Murong Yu had already unleashed his speed. With a leap, he jumped behind the stone man's head that was a few hundred feet in size. At the same time, the strength of his fist erupted, and he fiercely punched the giant's head. Rumble. After a shocking explosion, the stone man's head was instantly shattered into pieces by Murong Yu. Seeing this, Murong Yu snorted coldly. His figure flashed, and just as he was about to leave, he was shocked in the next moment, because he suddenly realized that even though the stone man's head had been shattered by him, he didn't seem to be dead. In the void, two incomparably huge fists shattered the void and fiercely smashed towards Murong Yu. With a flash, Murong Yu retreated explosively and avoided the attacks of the two huge fists. However, what puzzled Murong Yu was that there was only one stone man here, and one of the stone man's fists had already been shattered by him. Where did the second fist come from? Could it be that this stone man had a third hand? Murong Yu turned his gaze and looked at the stone man. With this look, his eyes almost popped out, because he saw that the stone man's fist that he had shattered had already recovered. This was not a difficult task for powerhouses of their level. However, what surprised Murong Yu was that at this moment he saw that the stone man's head was also growing back at a speed visible to the naked eye. You're still not dead, even after your head has been shattered. It seems that your soul isn't in your head. I want to see if you really can't die. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. With a flash, he charged forward again. Chapter 592. Boom, boom, boom. Murong Yu's figure kept moving in the void. Terrifying power was constantly being punched out by him, bombarding the stone man's body. Although Murong Yu was only a golden immortal, he had 7,500 coiling dragon power. His strength was even stronger than that of an ordinary immortal king. Although his opponent, the stone man, was at the Immortal King realm, his combat strength was far inferior to Murong Yu's. Therefore, when Murong Yu unleashed his strength, he directly crushed the stone man in terms of combat strength. Although the stone man was powerful, he was no match for Murong Yu at all. Murong Yu's every strike landed fiercely on the stone man's body. However, the stone man's attacks could not hit Murong Yu. Boom! Suddenly, a loud bang came from the stone man's body. Under Murong Yu's violent attacks, the stone man's hands, legs, head, and even his entire body exploded with a loud bang. Crash! Gravel flew out in all directions. The stone man, which was tens of thousands of feet tall, was finally smashed into pieces by Murong Yu. Let's see how you're going to recover now. With a thought, Murong Yu retreated thousands of miles away. He avoided being covered by the dust caused by the stone man's explosion. Looking at the flying gravel for a long time, Murong Yu finally confirmed that the stone man had been completely killed. Therefore, he continued on his way. However, at this moment, Murong Yu was surprised to see that the stones that originally belonged to the stone man's body began to squirm. These stones first trembled slightly. Then, as if there was an invisible force pulling them, these stones that were scattered in different parts of the land flew out one by one and gathered towards the center. What's going on? Could it be that the stone man can be resurrected? Murong Yu was shocked and curious, so he did not leave. Instead, he stood in the void and watched all of this. Countless stones quickly condensed. Not long after, they condensed into the appearance of a stone man that was tens of thousands of feet tall. Of course, this was only a rough estimate. Many parts of the stone man's body had already been crushed into powder by Murong Yu's power. Even if the stone man had the power to condense stone fragments, could it condense the powder that had turned into powder? Murong Yu sneered in his heart. He did not believe that these stone men had such heaven-defying ability. However, to Murong Yu's disappointment, the stone man really had such a heaven-defying ability. After the gravel recondensed into fragments, Murong Yu saw a gray force continuously drilled into the stone man's body. Immediately, Murong Yu, the stone man's body parts, the stone man, Murong Yu didn't have to wait for long. Soon, a stone statue that looked exactly the same as the one from before appeared in front of him. Isn't this too much of a scam? Murong Yu, who was in the void, was speechless. This stone man was shattered into such a state, yet he was still alive? Roar! After returning to its original form, the stone let out an earth-shattering sound and pounced towards Murong Yu. The stone man clearly had a lot of hatred for this person who had once shattered his body. Murong Yu sneered in his heart. You can resurrect? I don't believe it. Today, I'll definitely beat you to death. At the same time that Murong Yu was shocked, a ferocious spirit rose within him. He wanted to see if this stone man could really resurrect infinitely. Boom, boom, boom. This time, Murong Yu erupted with his strongest power and once again engaged in a fierce battle with the stone golem. Although the stone man had been resurrected, it was obvious that he was still no match for Murong Yu. Not long after, he was once again shattered by Murong Yu. This time, after Murong Yu smashed the stone man into pieces, he did not immediately attack. Instead, he slapped out with his palm and smashed the stone pieces into powder. However, what made Murong Yu speechless was that even though the stone man was smashed into powder, he could still resurrect. He could resurrect even after smashing it into powder? Regarding this, Murong Yu was even more shocked. While he was shocked by the stone man's heaven-defying ability, he could not help but think. In this chaotic space, was this stone man the only one with the ability to resurrect, or were all life forms so powerful that they all had the ability to resurrect? Resurrection was almost impossible in the immortal world, or even in the heavenly realm. Apart from the Phoenix clan, who could be reborn through nirvana, the other life forms. If they died, they died. They could not be resurrected. However, this stone man was beyond Murong Yu's knowledge. Boom! With a punch, he smashed the stone man into powder again. Murong Yu contacted Hichu and asked, Hichu, have you seen such a situation before? Where's this space? I've never heard of such a situation, nor have I heard of this space. Hichu's voice was also somewhat deep in thought. His experience was extraordinary and could be said to be very knowledgeable. However, the current situation was unheard of and unseen. This stone man should not be able to resurrect infinitely, Hichu said in a deep voice. Murong Yu nodded. My thoughts are the same. I want to see how many times he can resurrect. If he can resurrect infinitely, I want to die. As he spoke, the stone man resurrected again. After a shocking roar, the stone man once again pounced towards Murong Yu. The stone man obviously hated Murong Yu to the extreme for repeatedly killing him. However, the giant was no match for Murong Yu. He was killed again and again, resurrected again and again, killed again and again. Soon, the stone man had resurrected more than 10 times. Murong Yu was a little tired from fighting, but the giant was still resurrecting, as if it could resurrect infinitely. Roar! The stone man resurrected again, roared, and charged towards Murong Yu. This guy seemed to rely on his infinite resurrection to charge over and over again, wanting to exhaust Murong Yu to death. Go to hell! Murong Yu was furious. This time, he did not attack, but directly took out the yin-yang cauldron. The The yin-yang fire burst out and directly enveloped the stone man. In less than an instant, the 10,000 feet tall giant was burned to death by the yin-yang fire, not even leaving behind ashes. Let's see how you survive this time. Murong Yu's heart was ruthless. He did not leave, but floated in the void. After a long time, perhaps half a day, or perhaps a day passed. Finally, the stone man in front of Murong Yu that he hated did not resurrect. The world is finally peaceful. During this time, Murong Yu continuously killed the stone man that could not be killed. Even if he did not use up any energy, his mind was tired. At this time, the stone man was finally burned to death by his fire. He could not be more dead. Even if he could resurrect infinitely, there was nothing left after being burned by the yin-yang fire. After confirming that the stone man could not be resurrected, Murong Yu left this place and walked forward. Long after Murong Yu left, the void where he was originally at, a gray power condensed again. Then, not long after, the stone man that Murong Yu had burned to death by the yin-yang fire appeared again. If Murong Yu was here, he would definitely be depressed to the point of vomiting blood. However, this newly resurrected stone man seemed to be a little different from before. Previously, when he was resurrected, his face was full of hatred. However, at this time, his eyes were full of confusion. Then, he calmed down and turned into a huge stone lying on the ground. He did not seem to have any memories from before. Murong Yu continued onwards. Along the way, he encountered even more life forms with powerful cultivation bases. There were stone men, tree ants, and all sorts of spirits. There were all sorts of beings. These beings were not as strong as he had thought. Some were powerful, and some were not. Of course, after seeing Murong Yu, an outsider, they were not friendly. No matter how strong or weak they would attack Murong Yu. Murong Yu was even more depressed to find that these beings, no matter how strong they were, could be resurrected infinitely. In the end, Murong Yu was enraged and burned all of them to death with a single flame. Of course, this was what Murong Yu thought. However, he did not know that after he left, these beings, who should not have been able to be resurrected, miraculously came back to life. Of course, just like the stone man, they did not have any memories of Murong Yu after being resurrected. It was as if Murong Yu had never appeared in their memories. The world was infinitely big, and life could be resurrected infinitely. What was this place? In these few days, Murong Yu had already walked a considerable distance, but he still could not find the boundary of this space. During this process, Murong Yu even found some humans. The humans here were the same as the outside world. They had all sorts of forces and all sorts of cities. Of course, it was the same for the other races. However, what made Murong Yu depressed was that no matter where he went, as long as he encountered life, the other party would know that he was not from this world. They would bare their ferocious fangs at him and immediately attack. Whenever he encountered such a situation, Murong Yu was too lazy to make a move. Instead, he would directly take out the yin-yang cauldron and burn the other party to death. Therefore, the number of lives of various races that died in Murong Yu's hands was at least 8,000 or 9,000, if not 10,000. There was no choice. These guys, even if you did not kill them, they would still chase you. Murong, you could only get rid of them. However, Murong Yu still did not know what kind of world this world was. Even if he wanted to read the memories, he was depressed to find that all the memories of the beings here were sealed. He could not read them at all. Bang! The yin-yang fire erupted. Murong Yu burned an immortal king realm human expert to death. However, just after he burned this human expert to death, a huge crack suddenly appeared in the void in front of him. Then a huge black hand reached out from the crack and grabbed at Murong Yu. Chapter 593. The void split open and the giant black hand appeared. All of this happened in a split second. After that, the black hand traversed through space and time, and before Murong Yu could react, it had grabbed him. The moment Murong Yu was caught by the giant hand, he finally reacted. However, the moment he reacted, the giant black hand had already dragged him back into the crack in the void. The scene in front of him changed, and Murong, you finally saw that everything in front of him had returned to normal. The normal environment referred to the environment in the immortal realm and not the chaotic space. However, Murong was still a little depressed. How long had it been? He had already been captured twice. Moreover, he did not know if there would be a next time. However, he was just depressed. However, he wasn't angry or anything. This was because since the other party could capture him so easily, killing him would be a piece of cake for them. Getting angry at an expert that he could not fight against? This was definitely an act of suicide. Therefore, although Murong was unhappy, he did not show it. Instead, he observed the surrounding environment. In front of him was a group of buildings. There were palaces and ordinary room-like buildings. The scenery around these buildings was beautiful. There were small rivers, pavilions, terraces, and pavilions. The scenery was beautiful. However, in the face of this beautiful scenery, Murong did not let his guard down, nor did he let his guard down. After all, this space was too strange. Moreover, Murong did not know who had captured him. However, what made Murong feel a little relieved was that he could still contact Black Lotus and Hichu. These two with a guarantee of his safety. Master! Suddenly, a slightly old voice sounded in Murong's ears. At the same time, in the palace not far in front of Murong, a green-robed old man walked out and slowly walked toward Murong. Murong looked at the green-robed old man in surprise. He looked around and found that there was no one near him. Is he calling me? Murong was a little surprised. He didn't believe that he was the old man's master because he didn't know him at all. The green-robed old man walked in front of Murong and respectfully said to Murong, "Welcome, master. This is your first time in the Tian Fa space. This old man is the steward of the Tian Fa space. You can call me Steward Tian or give me a name." "Senior, did you recognize the wrong person?" Murong looked at the green-robed elder in shock. His heart was filled with doubt. "Master, I did not recognize the wrong person. You are the master of this place," Steward Tian explained. "This, elder, I don't even know where this place is. How can I be your master?" "You must have recognized the wrong person," Murong said with a wry smile. He didn't want to suddenly become someone's master. Although this green-robed old man looked very powerful, and according to Steward Tian, he was a master of this place. However, all of this was too surreal for Murong. The green-robed old man smiled. "Master, let's go to the main hall first so that this old servant can explain in detail." "All right." Then, Murong followed the old man into the main hall. In the main hall, the decorations were not luxurious. On the contrary, it had a simple feeling. This was the style that Murong liked. After sitting down, Murong quickly said to Steward Tian politely, "Steward Tian, you said that this is the Tian Fa space? And you recognize me as your master? I'm confused by all this. Can you tell me in detail?" "Master, have you heard of the Tian Fa order?" The green-robed old man looked at Murong and smiled faintly. "Tian Fa order?" Murong was shocked. He immediately sat up from his chair and looked at Steward Tian with a face full of shock. "Steward Tian, is this the Tian Fa writ space? Does the Tian Fa order really exist in this world? Is the Tian Fa order as heaven-defying as the legends say?" After recovering from his shock, Murong asked a few questions. These were all questions that he desperately wanted to know. Looking at Murong's reaction, Steward Tian couldn't help but nod. Previously, he was worried that Murong didn't know anything about the Tian Fa order. It would be difficult to explain. However, looking at Murong's shocked expression, he seemed to know about the existence of the Tian Fa order. This way, Steward Tian could directly explain. "That's right. This is the Tian Fa space. We are all in the Tian Fa order. And Master, you are the second master of the Tian Fa order." Steward Tian's words shocked Murong again. There really is a Tian Fa order? And I'm actually in the Tian Fa order space? Murong was extremely shocked. The impact of all this on him was too strong. It was so strong that he felt a little dizzy. It was hard for him to accept. Looking at Murong Yu's shocked expression, Steward Tian stopped and didn't continue. After a long time, Murong Yu finally calmed down from his shock. Steward Tian continued to explain. Steward Tian didn't say much. After briefly introducing the Tian Fa order, he directly inserted some memories into Murong Yu's memories. Tian Fa order. Just as Steward Ma said, it was one of the most powerful treasures in the world. As long as one had the Tian Fa order and was recognized as its master, one could control the Tian Fa palace and punish on behalf of the Tian Fa order. One could also obtain great benefits from the Tian Fa order. The legends were all true. The Tian Fa order represented the punishment of the Tian Fa order. The Tian here was the law of the world. To survive in this world, everything was restricted by the law of the world. All living things and non-living things could only survive within the law of the world. And if one defied the law of the world, the Tian would punish them. A light punishment might be a light punishment, a lesson. A heavy punishment might be obliterated by the Tian. In the beginning, this was indeed the case. But as more and more people defied the heavens, more and more sinners appeared. In the end, the Tian also began to feel tired. After all, he couldn't possibly kill all of them. And now, whether it was the cultivation world, the immortal world, or the God world, all cultivators were heaven-defying. The Tian originally didn't allow these people to exist. They should have been obliterated. But as more and more people defied the heavens, the law of the world began to change as the Tian began to feel tired. This was because the majority of these heaven-defying people weren't evil people. Although they defied the heavens, what they pursued was only great power and longevity. This was their desire for life. No matter how heartless the Tian was, it wouldn't obliterate them. Thus, in the end, the law of the world only punished those who had committed evil deeds or those who were evil. But while there were many good people in the world, there were also many evil people. These evil people had caused the world to be in shambles. But while the law of the world was powerful and could easily kill these people, the Tian had become tired. However, after such a long time, he was already tired. In the end, he turned a blind eye and did not care about these good people or bad people. After all, with the limitation of lifespan, it was impossible for these evil people to continue their evil deeds. Thus, when evil people ran amok in the world, they didn't receive any punishment from the world. Of course, it was only under certain circumstances that they would receive punishment from the law of the world. For example, undergoing tribulation. When some evil people were transcending their tribulations, their heavenly tribulations would be very ferocious. But not every cultivation level needed to undergo tribulation. Thus, the heavenly tribulation couldn't punish all evil people. Later on, the heavenly punishment writ came into being. Those who obtained the heavenly punishment writ could punish the evil people of the world on behalf of the heavens without violating the law of the world. At the same time, after punishing the evil people, they would receive a reward from the law of the world. The first owner of the heavenly punishment writ was the expert who created the heavenly punishment palace. The first palace master of the heavenly punishment palace and the first owner of the heavenly punishment writ. It was just that this powerhouse was also considered unlucky. At that time, his strength was almost at the peak of the world. But in the end, he died. After the first owner of the heavenly punishment writ died, the heavenly punishment writ became an ownerless item and disappeared without a trace. Even though the entire world was looking for the heavenly punishment writ, they couldn't find it. After a long time, the heavenly punishment writ was obtained by Murong Yu. During this long time, the heavenly punishment writ didn't fall into a deep slumber. It was always looking for a suitable owner. But although there were often people who received the heavenly punishment writs test, other than Murong Yu, no one could pass the heavenly punishment writs test. And those who didn't pass, the heavenly punishment writ only had one ending: death. Butler Tian gave Murong Yu a lot of memories. In a short period of time, Murong Yu couldn't digest all of them. So, he only took a brief look at the appearance of the heavenly punishment writ and its general functions. As for the specifics, He could slowly study it when he had time. But now, it wasn't a good time to study the Heavenly Punishment Writ. Butler Tion, it says that if one wants to become the owner of the Heavenly Punishment Writ, one must pass the Heavenly Punishment Writ's test? But I don't seem to have passed any test. Moronyu asked Butler Tion doubtfully. Master, you have passed the test. Butler Tion replied respectfully. What test? Moronyu couldn't help but feel puzzled. Killing 10,000 lives in the Heavenly Punishment Writ is no weaker than your own. Butler Tion replied. That's the test. Moronyu was dumbfounded. He didn't think that the test was too simple. In fact, if he didn't have the yin-yang flame, he wouldn't even be able to kill one of those lives, let alone 10,000. After all, those fellows could resurrect infinitely. On the contrary, if it was an ordinary person, they would have been exhausted to death. Moronyu finally understood why those people didn't pass the test. If they entered the Heavenly Punishment Writ and encountered those monsters that could resurrect infinitely, they would definitely be exhausted to death. Butler Tion, isn't the Heavenly Punishment Writ's design a little too cruel? Moronyu couldn't help but ask with a frown. If those lives didn't purposely attack him, Moronyu wouldn't have killed 10,000 lives for no reason just because of this test. Chapter 594. Only by killing 10,000 lives would one be considered to have passed the test of the Tion Fa order. If these 10,000 lives were villains, Moronyu would not feel anything. Most importantly, the Tion Fa order did not specify that these 10,000 lives were villains. As long as one killed 10,000 lives in the chaos space, one would pass the test. It did not matter if these 10,000 lives were good or bad. Hearing Moronyu's question, Steward Tion nodded slightly and smiled. It's not cruel at all. Master, please take a look. As he spoke, a scene appeared in front of Moronyu. It was the scene of Moronyu fighting with the lives in the chaos space. Moronyu had already left after burning those lives to ashes. However, the scene remained in the original space. Not long after, Moronyu saw the lives he'd burned to death coming back to life. They were not completely killed by Moronyu. 10,000 lives, all of them. Moronyu's expression changed slightly. Steward Tion, what's going on? Could it be that I did not kill them? Moronyu's expression turned gloomy. The main test of the Tion Fa order was to kill 10,000 lives in the chaos space. If Moronyu did not kill these lives, he would not pass the test of the Tion Fa order, and he would not be able to become the owner of the Tion Fa order. Steward Tion smiled. Master, you have passed the test. Steward Tion's meaning was clear. Moronyu had passed the test. In other words, those 10,000 lives were indeed killed by Moronyu. However, Moronyu clearly saw that those lives were not killed. After he left, they revived. Master, you have indeed killed all of them. However, in this Tion Fa space, they are immortal. Even if you have killed them, as long as I am far away, as long as the owner of the Tion Fa order wills it, they can revive. As long as the owner of the Tion Fa order wills it, they are truly immortal. Steward Tion explained. Moronyu was a little shocked. He finally understood. He did kill the 10,000 lives, but Steward Tion resurrected them. In fact, although Moronyu killed them, it was as if he didn't kill them. Steward Tion, what kind of life forms are they? How can you resurrect infinitely? Moronyu couldn't help but be interested. They are life forms unique to the Tion Fa realm. They were life forms created by the laws of the world from the very beginning. However, they could not be resurrected indefinitely, and it was impossible for them to live forever, because they also have a limited lifespan. The number of times a life form can be resurrected depends on their strength. The stronger they were, the more times they could revive. Of course, if their lifespans run out, they'll really be dead. Even I, or the owner of the Heavenly Punishment Writ, would not be able to revive them. This is because these are the laws of the world. Other than heaven, no one can change these laws. Moronyu is still in shock. Even if these people could not be resurrected infinitely, they could still be resurrected many times. Just like the first stone man Moronyu met. That guy was killed by Murong Yu more than 10 times, but he was not killed. He could still be resurrected without any injuries. It was really miraculous. Master, you can also resurrect infinitely in this realm. Moreover, you can resurrect without any injuries. As long as you don't die outside, and your lifespan is not exhausted, as long as you're in the Tian Fa order, you're truly immortal. Steward Tian said respectfully to Murong Yu. Murong Yu's eyes flashed with a bright light. If he could resurrect infinitely in the Tian Fa realm, then it would be of great significance to him, because he could use this to challenge the experts in the Tian Fa realm. Challenging experts could increase his battle experience and increase his strength. This was the best way to increase his strength. Steward Tian, how big is the Tian Fa realm? What kind of experts are there? Murong Yu's heart was restless. He could even feel his blood boiling. It's infinitely big. It's bigger than all the immortal realms and even the heaven realms combined. You could even say that this is a second world. There are countless experts. There are experts that you can imagine, and even experts that you can't imagine. In the Tian Fa realm, any life could be resurrected. They had many lives. Moreover, the Tian Fa realm was filled with all kinds of spiritual energy. Naturally, there would be more and more experts in the Tian Fa realm, and their strength would also increase. However, although every life in the Tian Fa realm could be resurrected, their lifespan was the same as the outside world. With the limitation of lifespan, even if they could resurrect infinitely, they could not live forever. Therefore, although there were many experts in the Tian Fa realm, it was not as many as Murong Yu imagined. Moreover, Murong Yu knew that the Tian Fa realm was extremely big. The primal chaos space was only the tip of the iceberg. The entire Tian Fa realm was not like the primal chaos space. To put it simply, the Tian Fa realm was another world. Like the outside world, it had its own history, legends, and historical remains. However, it was different from the outside world. Any life in the Tian Fa realm had the chance to be resurrected. Perhaps this was one of their advantages in the Tian Fa realm. Steward Tian, I wonder if the people in the Tian Fa realm can be brought to the outside world. Murong Yu's heart skipped a beat, and he suddenly asked. If he could bring the experts in the Tian Fa realm out, then with their heaven-defying talent of resurrection, Murong Yu would definitely be able to sweep through the immortal realm and even the heaven realm. Think about it. Murong Yu's subordinates led a group of experts to fight in the immortal realm. Although they were killed, they could be resurrected immediately. This would be a blow to the opponent's morale. Moreover, even if they were killed, they could be resurrected without any loss, and there would not be any losses. On the other hand, there would be one less opponent for each death. In this way, no matter how big the world was, who would be a match for Murong Yu? However, very quickly, Steward Tian shattered Murong Yu's beautiful imagination. The life in the Tian Fa realm can be brought to the outside world, and it would not affect their strength at all. However, once they are killed, they cannot be resurrected. They can only be resurrected in the Tian Fa realm. Murong Yu couldn't help feeling depressed, but he quickly regained his composure. After all, this was just a thought. Steward Tian, there should be conditions for bringing people out of the Tian Fa realm, right? Moreover, I can bring people in? Steward Tian nodded and said, the condition is that the other party must submit to you. Of course, this so-called submission does not require true submission. You only need to subdue the other party. As for the people in the outside world, you can also bring them into the Tian Fa realm. Here, they have the chance to be resurrected. Steward Tian explained. Murong Yu nodded. With his current strength, he could definitely make some experts submit to him. In this way, Murong Yu would have more and more experts under his command. Moreover, as his strength increased, he would be able to subdue more experts, and his strength would also increase. What made him the happiest was that the people in the outside world could also enter here. As long as he could bring Zhao, Jiqing, and the others into the Tian Fa realm, they could fight here without fear of death. Although the Hichu Luoshu realm was good, and although the Hichu Luoshu was an infinitely big world, there were no experts. It could even be said that in the entire realm, there were only Murong Yu and a few other life forms. They could not increase their strength through battle. However, the benefits of the Hichu Luoshu were obvious. In there, Hichu could use the Yin-Yang Cauldron to refine any elixir with pill formulas. It could accelerate the flow of time, and it could teleport. In fact, the Hichu Luoshu was originally a super magical treasure. As for which one was stronger? In other words, the Tian FA token was much stronger than the Hichu Luoshu. However, one should not forget that the Hichu Luoshu was known as the #1 treasure in the world. For many days, Murong Yu spent most of his time with Steward Tian. As he digested the various memories of the Tian FA token, he asked Steward Tian if there was anything he had doubts about. Half a month later, Murong Yu finally understood everything about the Tian FA token. However, he was still unable to truly control the Tian FA token. Although Steward Tian had already called a master, Murong Yu had yet to acknowledge the Tian FA token as its master. Steward Tian, let's begin the acknowledgement process. Murong Yu said in a deep voice. Master, are you ready? Once you've acknowledged the Tian FA token as its master, you can punish on behalf of the heavens. At the same time, you will obtain great benefits from the heavens. However, at the same time, once the news of you being the Tian FA token's master is leaked out, you will become the enemy of the entire world. You might even end up like the first master of the Tian FA token and be killed by others. Steward Tian said in a deep voice as he prepared to acknowledge the master. I've decided to acknowledge the master. Murong Yu's face was resolute and solemn. Although it was possible for him to become the enemy of the entire world, it was impossible for Murong Yu to let go of the opportunity to wield the Tian FA token. Moreover, Murong Yu would definitely regret it. In order to prevent himself from regretting, Murong Yu would not let go of the opportunity to acknowledge the master. Master, the acknowledgement process is simple. You just need to give me a drop of blood essence. Murong Yu nodded. Immediately, he forced out a drop of blood essence from his fingertip and passed it to Steward Tian. Steward Tian's expression was solemn. His hands formed a series of complicated and obscure seals in the void. Then, Murong Yu's drop of blood essence suddenly disintegrated into billions of molecules and rushed out in all directions. Not long after, Murong Yu felt that something was gradually connecting with his mind. Moreover, the connection was getting stronger and stronger. At the same time that Murong Yu acknowledged the master, the outside world, whether it was the mortal world, the immortal world, or the heavenly realm, all of them underwent a change. Chapter 595. At the same time as Murong Yu's heavenly punishment token recognized him as its master, the entire world, whether it was the mortal world, the immortal world, or the heaven realm, all of them underwent a change at the same time. The mortal world, the immortal world, and even the heaven realm. The entire world, no matter what kind of weather was in at that time, whether it was cloudless for thousands of miles or rainy. In fact, in every dangerous place that no one dared to set foot in. At the same time, the entire sky was shrouded by thick dark clouds. Tribulation clouds. The entire world was instantly enveloped by the tribulation clouds. Bolts of lightning continuously darted out from the tribulation clouds, and an incomparably terrifying pressure was emitted from the tribulation clouds, suppressing the entire world. At this moment, all life was alarmed. Under this incomparably terrifying pressure, the majority of the people felt uneasy in their hearts. Is this the end of the world? One by one, the cultivators looked at the thick tribulation clouds in the sky and felt the unstoppable pressure of heaven and earth. Their hearts were heavy. Even the experts who had entered closed-door cultivation came out one after another. This was because the aura emitted by the tribulation clouds seemed to be about to destroy the world, causing them to be terrified and unable to continue cultivating. It was not only the cultivation world, but also the immortal world. Even the experts of the heaven realm had heavy hearts at this moment. The end of the world? This word appeared in the hearts of many people. Looking at the changes in heaven and earth, what was the difference between this and the end of the world? Of course, it was only the thick tribulation clouds that enveloped the world, and the heavenly punishment had yet to descend. Once the heavenly punishment descended, even the people of the heaven realm felt that they would definitely not be able to resist it. One could imagine how terrifying these heavenly punishment were if even the experts of the heaven realm did not have the confidence to resist it. With the changes in heaven and earth, there must be a heaven-defying treasure appearing. Some experts who had lived long enough did not think so. Although heaven and earth were now enveloped by thick tribulation clouds, emitting a terrifying pressure that seemed to be able to destroy the world. However, they knew that this was not the end of the world, but the birth of a heaven-defying treasure. Usually, when a heaven-defying treasure appeared, it would cause a change in heaven and earth. Of course, the birth of a treasure would not cause a change in heaven and earth. It also depended on what kind of treasure it was. Just like when Hichu Luoshu and Murong Yu recognized each other as their masters, heaven and earth had also undergone a change. But there wasn't such a strong change. And now, the heavenly punishment token had recognized him as its master, causing such a terrifying change. The mutation produced by Hichu Luoshu is far inferior to the Tian Fa decree. Did that mean that the Hichu Luoshu was far inferior to the Tian Fa decree? In fact, the strength of a treasure was not entirely dependent on the intensity of the changes it caused. Although Hichu Luoshu's mutation was not as strong as the heavenly punishment decree, there was a reason for this, because their natures were fundamentally different. Those who possess the Tian Fa token can carry out punishment on behalf of Tian Fa. This was extremely heaven-defying. Furthermore, the heavenly punishment command token was formed by the laws of heaven and earth. It was a part of the laws of heaven and earth, allowing a successor to use the Tian Fa writ's ability to carry out punishment on behalf of Tian Fa. Carrying out punishment on behalf of the heavens was fatal to many lives in this world. Moreover, because the heavenly punishment token was a part of the rules of the world, after it recognized its master, the rules of the world naturally used a phenomenon to tell the world that the heavenly punishment token was about to reappear in the world. Hichu Luoshu, on the other hand, did not have the heaven-defying ability to punish on behalf of the heavens. It was not even a treasure formed by the laws of heaven and earth. Even if it was stronger than the heavenly punishment token, because it was not a threat to this world and did not violate the laws of heaven and earth, there would not be any strong changes in the world. The changes in the world came and went quickly. Just as everyone was feeling uneasy and fearful, the tribulation clouds that enveloped the entire world suddenly disappeared into thin air. It was as if they had never appeared. If not for all the lives that had witnessed the terrifying scene just now, no one would have believed that it was real. They would have thought that it was their own illusion. Not long after, many large forces in the heaven realm and many ancient experts received the news that the mortal world and the immortal world had also undergone changes at the same time. Since ancient times, only one treasure has appeared and caused the entire world to undergo changes. That is the heavenly punishment token. Could it be that the heavenly punishment token has appeared again? Some experts who knew about the heavenly punishment token could not help but feel their hearts burn with passion. Investigate, do everything possible to find out where this treasure appeared. We must obtain this treasure at all costs. For a moment, in the heaven realm, various large forces and experts issued orders one after another. They began to investigate where the heavenly punishment token appeared and even wanted to seize it. At the same time, various large forces in the immortal world and the mortal world also began to move. Of course, it was almost impossible for anyone in the mortal world and the immortal world to guess that the heavenly punishment token had appeared. However, after the tribulation clouds disappeared, they also realized that a treasure had appeared. A treasure that could cause such a terrifying change in the world must be very powerful. Everyone wanted to seize this treasure. However, no one knew about the existence of the heavenly punishment token. If one wanted to know about the heavenly punishment token's existence, one possibility was that the laws of heaven and earth had leaked it out. However, the laws of heaven and earth would not leak it out of their own accord. After all, he still needed to rely on the owner of the heavenly punishment token to punish him. If the heavenly punishment token was leaked out, the owner of the heavenly punishment token would become the enemy of the entire world. At that time, he would not even have time to escape. How could he punish him on behalf of the heavenly punishment token? Another possibility was that Murong had leaked it out himself. However, it was impossible for him to do so now, unless, when he was using the heavenly punishment token, someone had discovered some clues. At this moment, in the immortal realm, within the space of the heavenly punishment token, Murong had successfully recognized the heavenly punishment token as its owner. After recognizing the heavenly punishment token as its owner, Murong finally felt the connection between himself and the heavenly punishment token. Just like in the Hichu Luoshu world, after recognizing the heavenly punishment token as its owner, Murong completely controlled the heavenly punishment token. Now, as long as Murong was willing, he could go to any place within the heavenly punishment token. He could revive endlessly here, and he could see this vast and boundless world. Of course, there were some existences in this world that he could not directly sense through his senses. For example, there were some dangerous places in the heavenly punishment world and even more vast worlds. In reality, the heavenly punishment space was just like the outside world, divided into layers of worlds. The mortal world, the immortal world, and the heavenly realm. It was simply another world. In fact, Murong even suspected that even if the outside world was destroyed, nothing in the heavenly punishment world would be damaged. Now, Murong could only sense the heavenly punishment world's mortal world and immortal world. As for the heavenly realm of the heavenly punishment world, Murong's strength was not enough for him to sense it, unless he became a god. In fact, Murong could not even sense those experts whose strength exceeded his. For example, the immortal monarchs, immortal emperors, and immortal supremes of the immortal world. However, even so, Murong was still very happy. Because, with his sensing, Murong saw many precious herbs and materials in the heavenly punishment world, and even various spirit veins, immortal veins, and so on. Steward Tian, the various spirit veins and minerals in the heavenly punishment world could be harvested and brought out, right? Murong asked Steward Tian. Yes, Master, these can be harvested. However, Master, there's a limit to everything. Steward Tian first answered Murong's question with certainty, but then he said another sentence with a deeper meaning. Of course. Murong laughed. There were too many things in the heavenly punishment world. There were all kinds of herbs, materials, and spirit veins of various grades. Murong only needed to take a very, very small portion of them, and it would be enough. Would he be so stupid as to take all these things and bring them out to the outside world? One must know that he now had the heavenly punishment token. Everything in the heavenly punishment world could be said to be his. Even those lives were his subjects. In other words, with the heavenly punishment token, Murong was no longer a poor man. His wealth, even if all the forces in the immortal world were added together, could not compare to a hair from 9 oxen. However, Murong had already obtained too many things in the underground palace. Now, it was just icing on the cake, making him even richer. It did not make him very happy. Steward Tian, is there any soul grass in the heavenly punishment world? Murong could not help but ask. Yes. Steward Tian replied with certainty. Murong was immediately overjoyed. I can take it. No. Murong was stunned and looked at Steward Tian with some confusion. Steward Tian then explained, in the heavenly punishment world, as long as you have enough ability, you can take anything you want. However, soul grass is not within the scope of your ability. If you need it, you have to complete some missions to get it. Murong suddenly understood. Soul grass existed in the heavenly punishment world, but it was not something that Murong could touch with his current strength. Perhaps it was in the heavenly realm. Even if it was, Murong did not have the ability to get it. As long as he completed a mission, he could get the soul grass. The soul grass was the reward of the mission. As long as he completed the mission, heaven would reward him with the soul grass. Steward Tian, what mission? Murong was immediately excited. As long as he had the soul grass, it would be easy. Steward Tian shook his head. Master, for that mission, you still do not meet the requirements. You have to at least have the strength of an immortal emperor. Otherwise, even if you accept the mission, you will not be able to complete it. Murong's heart sank. He immediately said in a deep voice that is hard to say, "Do you want me to kill an immortal emperor expert?" Yes, to get the soul grass, you have to kill an immortal emperor expert. At least 10,000 early-stage immortal emperor experts and above. 10,000 early-stage immortal emperor experts and above? Murong was silent. Not to mention 10,000, he did not even have the ability to kill one. Chapter 596. In order to obtain the soul grass, he had to complete a mission from the Tian FA token. Kill 10,000 evil men, 10,000 immortal emperor-level evil men, and Murong would obtain the soul grass. After knowing the requirements of this mission, Murong immediately went silent. He did not have the ability to kill so many immortal emperors. Moreover, Murong still had a problem. Butler Tian, how do I know who are the evil men? Who are the good men? Murong asked curiously. It was impossible to tell if a person was evil or not. Of course, those who committed heinous crimes and didn't try to hide themselves would know about it. However, some people disguised themselves very well. On the surface, they would appear to be a good man, but in reality, they were evil men. Such people, whether in the mortal world, immortal world, or heavenly realm, were not few. In this world, no one can escape the control of the laws of heaven and earth. Every life is under the watch of the heavens at all times. In this world, every action cannot escape the eyes of the heavens. The heavens were also the so-called heavens. The heavens were also the laws of heaven and earth. It was the true ruler of this world. The heavenly punishment token is a treasure forged by the heavens. The owner of the heavenly punishment token can see the good and evil of the world, good and bad. Steward Tian explained. What do you think? Murong's interest was piqued. If it's a person, you can see that his body will emit a black halo. The more evil the person is, the darker the halo. A good person will emit a white halo. The denser the white halo, the more good the person has done. Under this halo, there are only two kinds of people in the world, either evil or good. Then, am I a good person or a bad person? Murong asked curiously. You can barely be considered a good person. Butler Tian said indifferently. Murong rolled his eyes. He did not seem to have done anything bad. He only killed people occasionally and destroyed a family or force. Killing people was something that all cultivators had experienced. It was very normal. How do you differentiate between good and evil men? Almost all cultivators have the experience of killing people. Then, are they considered evil people? Those who do a lot of bad things are naturally evil. Killing someone who deserved to be killed, or killing an evil person, or being forced to fight back, or justifiable self-defense, was not considered evil. I'm not too sure about the specifics. These were all set by the heavens. Other than the heavens themselves, who else would know how they were divided? Although Steward Tian knew a lot, he was only the steward of the Tian FA writ. It was impossible for him to know too much. Then, will I be rewarded by the heavens after completing a certain mission? In other words, if I need something, do I have to complete the mission? Murong pondered for a moment and asked this question that he was more concerned about. Steward Tian nodded. That's right. If you want to gain benefits from the heavens, then you have to pay a corresponding price. There's no free lunch in this world. Then what do I get? For example, some kind of divine weapon? Or Is it some kind of heaven-defying cultivation technique? Or could it directly increase my strength? Whatever you want, it's fine. But the rarer the thing you need, the higher the price. Even if you want to increase your strength, it's still possible. You have to know that the heavens rule over everything. If it's willing, it can instantly increase your strength to the strongest. Outside of the heavens, you'll be the strongest. Moronyu rolled his eyes. It was easy for Steward Tion to say it, and he knew that there was such a possibility. The key was that the price to increase one's strength was definitely not low. Moronyu could not possibly complete it, as long as one paid a corresponding price. The space of the Tion Fa Rit was all-encompassing. Even if it did not exist, as long as the heavens were willing, it could create something out of nothing. In the following time, Moronyu continued to familiarize himself with the space of the Tion Fa Rit. A month later, after he had familiarized himself with the Tion Fa Rit, Moronyu decided to leave. Black Lotus, give me a spatial shield. After preparing to leave the space of the Tion Fa Rit, Moronyu communicated with Black Lotus. Although the Tion Fa Rit was heaven-defying, it did not have the ability to stop the flow of time. Of course, if Moronyu was in the Tion Fa Rit, it would be a different story. Moreover, what made Moronyu depressed was that although the Tion Fa Rit was powerful, it was extremely heaven-defying. However, under normal circumstances, the Tion Fa Rit could not be used as a powerful magic treasure. In other words, Moronyu could not use the Tion Fa Rit to attack or defend. However, when Moronyu was in danger, he could enter the world of the Tion Fa Rit. However, if Moronyu entered the world of the Tion Fa Rit, the Tion Fa Rit would not be able to move. It would just turn into a speck of dust and stay in place. Compared to the Hichu Luo Shu, which could attack, defend, and teleport, the Tion Fa Rit was far inferior to the Hichu Luo Shu in this aspect. Of course, both had their strengths. Black Lotus did not respond to Moronyu. Instead, he directly cast a space shield on the surface of Morongyu's body. Then, with a thought from Moronyu, he appeared in the narrow and long ravine where he was originally at. He glanced to the side. The huge, smooth stone wall was still there. However, no one knew that the Tion Fa Rit, which had been hidden in the stone wall, had entered Morongyu's body. Success. This time, in the immortal state, not only did he obtain a Black Lotus with the rules of space, but he also obtained the Tion Fa Rit. Otherwise, Moronyu would have dealt with him long ago. One must know that killing evil people was beneficial to Moronyu, even if the Heavenly Punishment Order did not give him a task. After leaving the sight of these people, Moronyu entered the Hichu Luoshu world and returned to Feng City directly. 10 years. Moronyu had been in the Heavenly Punishment world for 10 years. When Moronyu returned to Feng City, he was surprised to see that Feng City had become a big city. It was at least several times bigger than 10 years ago. There were many more experts in Feng City. There were immortal kings, immortal monarchs, and even a few immortal emperors. Of course, Moronyu could not feel the existence of these experts. This was what Hichu told him. As long as Hichu wanted, he could perceive everything within a certain range. What's going on? Is it because of me that these experts have gathered here? Moronyu was puzzled. This was because, in addition to the many experts in Feng City, Moronyu had also discovered that there were many more experts in the Heavenly Court. Moronyu saw many experts cultivating in the Heavenly Court. These people were naturally people who had joined the Heavenly Court. Otherwise, how could they be in the Heavenly Court? Chapter 597. In the main hall of the Heavenly Court, Moronyu boldly sat on the main seat, while Heihu, Qing Jian, and the rest of the seven stood respectfully below him. Black Tiger, how has the Heavenly Court developed in the past 10 years? Moronyu looked at everyone with a smile and asked Black Tiger. Black Tiger's face showed a trace of excitement, but he didn't respectfully say, "My lord, Our heavenly court has developed very quickly in the past 10 years. Now, our heavenly court has control of the entire Feng province. All the factions in the Feng province have become our heavenly court's subordinate factions. The overall strength of the Feng province wasn't very strong. The strongest factions were the Heavenly Punisher Palace and Greensword sect, which were second-rate sects with immortal kings. Before Murong Yu left the Feng province, he had already subdued Green, Sword Down Master, and the rest. At that time, the Feng province was basically under the Heavenly Court's control. Black Tiger and the rest used a few years to make the rest of the factions in the Feng province become the Heavenly Court's subordinate factions and then completely control the Feng province. Black Tiger, you all did well. Murong Yu nodded and praised them. Black Tiger and the rest only made those factions subordinate to the Heavenly Court. They didn't destroy them or bring them into the Heavenly Court. This was exactly what Murong Yu wanted. Although the Feng province was a remote province, the number of weak sects were as many as the hairs on an ox. If they were all destroyed, it would chill the hearts of the Feng province's people. However, because of their strength, it wasn't good to bring them into the Heavenly Court. The Heavenly Court didn't need so many people. In fact, the Heavenly Court needed people who were loyal and had good aptitude. Therefore, their way of dealing with it was just right. Pass down the order. Any faction that belongs to the Feng province and their outstanding disciples can apply to join the Heavenly Court, as long as they pass the Heavenly Court's test. Black Tiger, I'll leave this to you. Murong Yu said in a deep voice. Although these sects were weak, there were still some people with good aptitudes in their sections. If these people stayed in these small factions for their entire lives, they were destined to have no achievements. Yes, Black Tiger and the rest were somewhat excited. They had also thought of this, but without Murong Yu's consent, they did not dare to implement it. Now that Murong Yu had given such an order, the Heavenly Court would only become stronger and stronger. Other than that, I've seen many experts joining the Heavenly Court. Has the Feng state expanded by a few times? Many powerhouses from the immortal world came to Feng City after the news spread that you wanted to buy the soul grass. Soon, Feng City could no longer accommodate so many experts, so it had to expand several times. However, there are still a lot of strong people coming over. Feng City can't accommodate so many people. Meow, he said excitedly as he walked out. These experts are all here because of your reputation, because of my lord's medical skills. At this point, Miao, Yi, Hong Yu, and the rest of the seven looked at Murong Yu with burning admiration. At this time, the news of Murong Yu's actions in the underground palace had finally spread. Murong Yu's medical skills were rumored to be miraculous. The divine physician. When the news of Murong Yu being the divine physician spread, everyone in the Heavenly Court was excited. This was because their master of the Heavenly Court was a divine physician. He could even remove the death chi from a hidden illness that even a celestial emperor could not cure. At that time, Murong Yu was only an overarching heavenly supreme celestial. Everyone in the Heavenly Court was confident in Murong Yu. Now that Murong Yu was only an overarching heavenly supreme celestial, his medical skills were already so terrifying. What would happen when he became stronger? What would happen when he became a celestial king, celestial duke, or even a celestial emperor? Everyone in the Heavenly Court was confident in the future of the Heavenly Court. They believed that under Murong Yu's leadership, the Heavenly Court would grow rapidly and become a superpower in the immortal world. At that time, all of them would be senior statesmen. Senior statesmen. Everyone in the Heavenly Court could not help but feel excited when they thought of this. Apart from the people in the Heavenly Court, there were countless powerhouses from the immortal world who had come to Feng City because of its reputation. Aside from a few who had come to seek medical treatment due to some hidden illness or other ailments, the rest had come because of Murong Yu's reputation and wanted to become his followers. Now, there are tens of thousands of celestial kings in Feng City and thousands of celestial monarchs. There are also hundreds of celestial emperors in Feng City. Meow, he said excitedly. Murong Yu's eyes flashed. Although these people were not from the heavenly court, their presence in Feng City would undoubtedly increase the strength of the heavenly court and the entire Feng province. It would be a great deterrent to other forces. Furthermore, Murong believed that with so many experts, if they stayed in Feng City, Murong was confident that he could gradually make them join the heavenly court and become a part of it. Among them, there are more than 300 celestial kings and more than 20 celestial dukes who have just joined the heavenly court. There is even a celestial emperor. However, these celestial dukes and celestial emperors have not officially joined the heavenly court yet. Murong was surprised. Murong had expected that there would be celestial kings joining the heavenly court. Murong was not surprised that there would be celestial dukes joining the heavenly court. However, there were celestial emperors joining the heavenly court. This left Murong somewhat astonished. However, Black Tiger and the others were still celestial kings. They did not know if these celestial dukes and celestial emperors were sincere in joining the heavenly court. In order to join the heavenly court, one must be absolutely loyal. They had no way of knowing this. Therefore, they could only leave these celestial dukes and celestial emperors to Murong and let him make the decision. Murong nodded slightly. You have done well. However, there are still too few powerhouses joining the heavenly court. There are so many people who came because of the heavenly court, but there were only a few people who joined the heavenly court. This made Murong speechless. Master, many people are waiting and watching. As long as you show your sincerity, I believe many people will join the heavenly court. Han Yu said with a smile. Smiles appeared on everyone's faces. In these 10 years, Murong did not show up at all. Although his medical skills were unparalleled, he did not show up. How could he let those powerhouses join the heavenly court? Black Tiger, make the arrangements. I need to meet that celestial emperor and those celestial dukes. The next day, in the main hall of the heavenly court, other than Murong, Black Tiger, and the others, there were more than 20 powerhouses. Among them, one was a celestial emperor, and more than 20 of them were celestial dukes. Looking at these powerhouses, Murong frowned slightly. This was because he saw that most of these powerhouses had black halos on their bodies. Although the halos were not very black, they were at least above the ranks of villains. Among the more than 20 people, only a few of them had white halos on their bodies. Moreover, the halos were only faint white. Greetings, Master of the Heavenly Court. After seeing Murong, everyone bowed slightly. Even the Celestial Emperor had no choice but to bow. Although it was beneath him for an immortal emperor to bow to a perfected golden immortal, it was still beneath him. However, from another point of view, Murong's medical skills were unparalleled in the world. As the saying goes, those who are capable are teachers. In this aspect, he, and Celestial Emperor, was far inferior to Murong. Therefore, he bowed with a clear conscience. Murong nodded. Very good. I believe that everyone has come here because of our reputation. They want to join the heavenly court and become a part of it. However, our heavenly court has a rule. Anyone who joins the heavenly court must have enough loyalty. Perhaps some of you don't really want to join the heavenly court, but are spies sent by other sections. For such people, let me give you a piece of advice. You'd better give up this idea. Once I find out, I'll kill you without mercy. Don't doubt whether I have this ability. As he spoke, Murong slightly released his aura. A surging aura burst out, although this aura was nothing in front of these people. However, Murong was only a golden immortal. The aura of the immortal king realm. A golden immortal has the strength of the immortal king realm. Everyone, including the Celestial Emperor, was shocked. A golden immortal had the strength of the immortal king realm. When Murong became a 9 heavens Xian immortal, wouldn't he have the strength of the immortal monarch realm? Thinking of this, a myriad of thoughts appeared in everyone's minds. My little strength may not be enough to enter everyone's eyes. However, don't forget my identity. With my divine hands, I can guarantee that even those so-called divine doctors in the immortal world can't treat terminal illnesses. I can treat them with my bare hands. Moreover, I believe that all of you know that there are more than 10,000 immortal emperors who owe me a favor. And once I find out who dares to betray the heavenly court, even if our heavenly court is not strong enough, I think that many immortal emperors will kill to repay my favor. Deterrence. Absolute deterrence. Even if the heavenly court was not strong enough, as long as Muronyu was there, not many forces would dare to touch Muronyu. Moreover, as long as Muronyu continued to use his medical skills to treat some experts, the heavenly court would only become stronger and stronger. I'll give you a choice. I'll let you join the heavenly court. However, if you have other motives, then leave as soon as possible. I won't pursue the matter now. Once I find out in the future, I'll kill you without mercy. Master of the heavenly court, I sincerely want to join the heavenly court. I have no other intentions. Before Muronyu finished speaking, the immortal emperors began to express their intentions. Muronyu nodded. None of the 20 immortal monarchs left. These people were sincere in wanting to join the heavenly court. Of course, this was only what they said. Were they really sincere? Muronyu would naturally know. Chapter 598. As the immortal monarchs expressed their opinions, Muronyu indifferently looked at them and directly met their gazes. These immortal monarchs seemed to want to prove their sincerity as they looked at Muronyu. On the surface, their eyes did not blink, and there was nothing strange. After a long time, Muronyu sent a voice transmission to Black Lotus. Black Lotus, are they lying? Black Lotus's weak mental fluctuation told Muronyu that these people were not lying. After receiving Black Lotus's answer, Muronyu not only heaved a sigh of relief, but also revealed a smile on his face. Since Black Lotus said that they were not lying, then there was nothing wrong with them. However, why did Muronyu trust Black Lotus so much? How could Black Lotus tell if they were lying? Was it so magical? In fact, Black Lotus could not tell whether they were lying or not, nor could he know what their ideals were. However, Black Lotus was an expert of the law of space. For an expert of his level, if there was something strange in one's mind, the space would have a specific fluctuation. If these people were lying, then they would definitely be very nervous. Therefore, even if they acted as if nothing was wrong, the space around them would have different fluctuations because of their mental activity. Black Lotus could determine if these people were lying based on these spatial fluctuations. Of course, if these people were so powerful that even Black Lotus could not detect them, then they were really good at concealing themselves. They were definitely experts in this aspect. After knowing that these people were not lying, Muronyu smiled but did not immediately say anything. Instead, he turned to look at the only immortal emperor in the hall. This was a middle-aged man in gray clothes. His face was pale and his body was thin. He looked like a sickly person. Who would have thought that he was an expert of the early-stage immortal emperor realm? Xiaozhua, tell me the reason why you want to join the heavenly court. Muronyu looked at the middle-aged immortal emperor and asked indifferently. The middle-aged immortal emperor was called Xiaozhua. He was an expert of the early-stage immortal emperor realm. It was said that he was a rogue cultivator. Xiaozhua bowed slightly to Muronyu. After pondering for a moment, he said, "What I'm interested in is your medical skills, Heavenly Court's master. I believe that your achievements in the future will be extraordinary and the Heavenly Court will become more and more powerful. However, this is not enough for me to join the Heavenly Court. If you can cure my hidden illness, I, Xiaozhua, will follow you wholeheartedly in the future." A light flashed in Muronyu's eyes. How do I know if you are telling the truth? What if after I cure your hidden illness, you never come back? Then wouldn't I lose both my wife and my soldiers? I'm not such a person, Xiaozhua said in a deep voice. Xiaozhua said. Xiaozhua's face darkened. It's fine if you don't believe me, master of the heavenly court. I Xiaozhua's, and will definitely do what I ask you say. As long as you cure my illness, I will be a member of the heavenly court and live and die with the heavenly court. Black Lotus, what do you think of this person? Muronyu looked at Xiaozhua indifferently and secretly contacted Black Lotus. His words should be trustworthy. Black Lotus's weak mental wave told Murongyu that Xiahou Zhuo could be trusted. Murongyu nodded inwardly. After looking at Xiahou Zhuo for a long time, a smile suddenly appeared on his face. Xiahou Zhuo, don't regret this. Once I cure your illness, you'll be a member of the Heavenly Court. You can still regret it now. Think about it again. Do you really want to join the Heavenly Court? Xiahou Zhuo's eyes flashed as he said in a deep voice, "There's no need. I've already made up my mind. As long as the Master of the Heavenly Court cures my hidden illness, I will join the Heavenly Court and live and die with the Heavenly Court. Then, I wish you the best of luck in becoming the first immortal emperor of the Heavenly Court." Murongyu faintly smiled. He didn't want to know what Xiahou Zhuo's hidden illness was. No matter what it was, with his current life force, treating it was as easy as flipping his hand. Even if he couldn't cure it now, Murongyu would definitely be able to cure it after his cultivation level increased. Therefore, Xiahou Zhuo joining the Heavenly Court was a sure thing. At the same time, Murongyu looked at the 20 or so immortal monarchs and said with a smile, "Congratulations on becoming a member of the Heavenly Court. As long as you join the Heavenly Court, I, Murongyu, can guarantee you that you won't regret it. On the contrary, you will feel proud to be a member of the Heavenly Court soon." Following that, Murongyu gave them a few more words of encouragement before having who bring them down. These people were all experts of the Heavenly Court. Murongyu naturally wouldn't treat them unfairly. They would still receive the benefits they deserved. Moreover, who was the wealthiest force now? There was no doubt about this. If Murongyu was the second, no one would dare to say they were the first. After all, he had the whole heavenly punishment world as his backing. His wealth was unimaginable to ordinary people. After spending a few days dealing with some matters in the Heavenly Court, Murongyu came to the manor of Shangwan Bo, Elder Yi, and the others. The three of them hadn't left Feng City. On the surface, they didn't have anything to do in their own forces. Anyway, it was the same wherever they stayed. In fact, Murongyu knew that the three of them were guarding the Heavenly Court for him. After all, although the Heavenly Court had a mortal Emperor Ming-Ji, there was a saying that one fist couldn't beat two hands. If there were experts looking for trouble, immortal Emperor Ming-Ji wouldn't be able to deal with them alone. If Shangwan Bo and the others were here, they could help a little. When he deterred other forces, he also deterred those experts who came to Feng Province. "Haha, brother, you're finally done?" Seeing Murongyu coming over, Shangwan Bo immediately laughed and said, "Murong, congratulations on recruiting a general. The Heavenly Court has become more powerful." Elder Yi walked over and said with a smile. They had also heard about Murongyu recruiting Xiahou Zhuo and the other 20 immortal emperors. "Haha, it's just an immortal emperor. Our Heavenly Court is still very weak. Compared to your forces, it's really insignificant." Murongyu said with a laugh, "Brother, you're not being kind. Our forces have developed for countless years to reach their current scale. How many years has it been for your Heavenly Court? If I'm not wrong, the Heavenly Court's development will be faster and faster. It's only a matter of time before it surpasses us." "Maybe." Murongyu smiled faintly. He had full confidence in this. Not to mention Shangwan Bo's forces, even those super forces and giants like the Immortal Palace would be trampled under his feet. It was only a matter of time. Moreover, now that he had the Heavenly Punishment Order, he would obtain countless benefits in the future. Whether it was himself or his forces, they would all welcome a terrifying speed of improvement. The few of them chatted for a while, then Murongyu looked at Guanjie. Feeling Murongyu's gaze, Guanjie's heart skipped a beat, and he became slightly excited. "Murong, can you heal my broken arm now?" Guanjie asked excitedly. Although his broken arm did not affect his combat strength much, the key was that he could not cultivate wholeheartedly because he had to suppress the power. For a long time, his strength could not be improved. "It should be. However, Senior, you don't have to have too much hope." Murongyu nodded and said. This time, his strength had broken through and his life force had advanced again, becoming even more powerful. He should be able to purify the strange power around Guan Jie's broken arm. Murong, don't keep calling me senior. You can call me big brother, or just call me Elder Guan. Guan Jie said in a deep voice. Murong nodded and said, Elder Guan, let's give it a try then. As they spoke, Murong took the lead and walked into a house next to them. Guan Jie followed suit excitedly. Shangwan Bo and Elder Yi exchanged a look when they saw the two of them entering the house. They could not help but exclaim, Murong's strength has improved again. In just 10 years, he has broken through from the mastery of the overarching heavenly supreme celestial stage to the mastery of the great overarching golden celestial stage. Although Murong is only a great overarching golden celestial, his strength is comparable to a celestial king, Shangwan Bo said with a sigh. The two of them were once again shocked by Murong Yu's breakthrough speed and powerful strength. This was especially true for Shangwan Bo. When he first met Murong Yu was only a profound celestial stage profound celestial. Not long after, when they entered the underground palace, Murong Yu's strength had improved by a whole stage and became an overarching heavenly supreme celestial. In the underground palace, Murong Yu had displayed his unparalleled medical skills for the first time, shocking everyone. Not long after the incident in the underground palace, Murong Yu's strength had already reached the mastery of the great overarching golden celestial stage. The speed of his strength improvement was truly shocking. He'd advanced from the mysterious immortal realm to the advanced stage of the golden immortal realm in less than 100 years of time, and he was only a step away from stepping into the nine heavens' mysterious immortal realm. Such a speed of advancement was absolutely unprecedented. Elder Yi suddenly said, I'm curious. Will he break through to our level, or even reach the ancestor realm and ascend to the heavenly realm? Elder Yi suddenly said with a look of anticipation. I believe that day won't be too far away. Currently, we're still stronger than him, but I believe it won't be long before Murong Yu's strength is on par with ours. In the end, we'll even have to look up to him, Shangwan Bo said with a laugh. Elder Yi nodded in agreement. With Murong Yu's speed of improvement, as long as he did not die prematurely, there was a high chance that he would ascend to the heaven realm. However, if they wanted to ascend to the heaven realm, it was extremely difficult. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.